Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1096 of the War News stream. And of course, it is the Sunday night fundraiser stream, and we're already up to $762 raised of the goal, which is tremendous to see. But we also have massive news tonight that apparently Ukraine's once again attacked major Russian oil refineries. Also, Zelensky's offering to resign in exchange for NATO membership, and there are heavy Russian losses on all the fronts. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to hear significant news that a major Ukrainian drone attack has occurred within the western regions of the Russian Federation, causing significant damage to oil storage and oil refinery sites throughout areas south of Moscow. We have also been able to hear significant news at the exact same time that it appears that Russian forces are still in retreat on the major battlefields of Pokrovsk and Terensk, as Ukrainian armed forces are continuing to drive their counterattacks home and are also taking a significant number of Russian prisoners at this time. Not only that, but across the entirety of the front line, from the areas around Seversk and all the way up to Drovchina, or the battlefield of Kupiansk, and all the way down into the directions of Velika Novosilka, we have been able to see Ukrainian forces conducting heroic defenses of the front lines and obliterating Russian attack columns that have been attempting to break through and have been completely turned away or destroyed outright on the battlefield. Not only that, but in other areas inside of Ukraine, we have been able to hear today that President Volodymyr Zelensky has confirmed that U.S. military aid, as of this day, right now, is still continuing to flow to Ukraine, but time is running out. According to President Zelensky, there is $15 billion of allotted military equipment that the United States has approved to be sent to Ukraine by the Congress and approved by the prior president that is still on its way into Ukraine. But he also stated that at this point there are no new aid packages that are being created or approved for Ukraine at this time. However, he has made it very clear today that President Zelensky would be more than willing to take the hit and has offered to resign and step down immediately as soon as the deal was made as president of Ukraine if the state of Ukraine was able to make it into NATO. That was a deal that was given by Zelensky to the public today, and we've also seen that Zelensky has been taking some incredibly diplomatic actions towards the United States, largely trying to smooth over American-U.S. relations that have been ruffled recently due to statements of the president of the United States. Meanwhile, we've also been able to see in other areas that the United Kingdom has made an open statement that new sanctions will be arriving here very soon against the Russian Federation, and we've also been able to hear that the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom and the President of the French Republic will be arriving inside the United States here very soon to encourage the President of the United States to not abandon the Ukrainians, but to support them and continue the war until the negotiating position in between the United States and the Russian Federation, or largely the West and Russia, would be on favorable compromising terms and not a one-way direction form of negotiations. We've also been able to see inside of Beirut in Lebanon that the official funeral for Nasrallah having been killed many months ago in an Israeli airstrike, was finally conducted today, and the Israelis seem to have largely dropped in and crashed the party by flying F-35 aircraft over the middle of the funeral as it was going on. We have loads and loads of news to cover tonight, mostly inside of Ukraine, as the international sphere has been a little bit quiet today, especially considering just the amount of relevant information and news that we have that's coming out of Ukraine at this time. It's an unbelievable thing, to be entirely honest with y'all, how much news has come out of Ukraine today, and it is absurd, the amount. It's actually been so much that it was really hard to even slip in the Nasrallah funeral segment, because we have about individually 35 news pieces that have come out of Ukraine or are directly related to the Ukraine conflict as of today. So strap in, because that's what we're going to be covering for the large part of tonight. But moving on into the Russian Federation, and specifically the areas south of Moscow, we have been able to see that the state of Ukraine launched one of the most successful drone attacks that we have seen in prior weeks of the conflict, as the Ukrainian state is once again attempting to reinvigorate its oil campaign against the Russian Federation, knocking out oil depots that house either crude oil or usable fuel products, and also targeting destroying Russian oil refineries as well, which are still crucial to the Russian economy's ability to function and also the Russian military's ability to operate as well. We were able to see that within the city of Ryazan, that the Ryazan refinery has been hit once again by Ukrainian drones, and significant explosions were seen all the way from Ryazan itself as the refinery was getting hit by multiple drones and going up into a significant blaze. Oh yeah, by the way, I forgot to mention before we get into this that tonight we are running the Sunday night fundraiser as per usual. Every one of y'all knows that it's Elite Spring Army tradition, and tonight's fundraiser is for Revived Soldiers of Ukraine. I don't even have to give an introduction to that fundraiser. It's an amazing one, and they do great help saving soldiers in the Ukrainian armed forces that have been near mortally wounded in the line of service, defending not only Ukraine, but largely Western interests as a whole. But moving on into this clip, we were able to see the explosions and flames of the refinery off in the distance. You see them right there.
Oh, and look at that. That's a huge one. Also, how many times has Ryazan been hit at this point? Seems like the refinery's been smacked at least a couple of times at this point.
Dude, the Russians have like that little chalkboard that says days without accidents, and like it was like up to 7 days, and then they got hit again today, so they had to erase it and put a 0 up there or something like that, because it gets hit at this point, I would say about monthly. The Ryazan refinery does, at least. The Ryazan refinery is fairly significant, and some of y'all will remember this one, because it wasn't too long ago. This actually had been hit previously, because many of y'all will remember that the power plant, which is literally pretty much within the campus of the oil refinery, was also hit in the last attack, which occurred about 3 weeks ago, and now we are seeing a brand new attack, which is this one today, hitting dead on to the Ryazan oil refinery again, and knocking it out again. It's a really shocking. We didn't even really get enough information to confirm whether this refinery had been brought online yet or not. But it does appear that it is going to be brought offline, regardless of whether it was online or still offline. But another thing that's a little bit grim that I saw before we started to stream tonight about the Ryazan oil refinery is that it is, once again, one of the most prolifically hit targets that the Ukrainians have gone out of their way to try and destroy over the course of their oil campaigns in the earlier part of 2023, 2024, and 2025. But one thing that is even more grim about this refinery is the fact that most of the war dead from the war in Ukraine that are returned to Ryazan and buried are literally buried directly west of the oil refinery itself. So if you were working in one of the condensing towers of the refinery, you can quite literally look out into the fields just to the west of the oil refinery and see the massive brand new cemeteries that have been created just to house the Russian war dead from the war in Ukraine. And we can even see a brand new area of the cemetery over here, which is getting filled in more and more with each passing month, and the amount of war dead that's coming from this one town in Russia, which is Ryazan, which I do have to remind many of y'all is not really that big of a town, at least in terms of the Russian Federation. Ryazan has a population, I believe, of around 200,000 people. So the fact that the cemeteries are beginning to grow out this quickly and this prolifically really is showing the kind of impact and losses that are being sustained across the whole of the Russian Federation, except for St. Petersburg and Moscow, which usually do not have any large amounts of war casualties because those citizens are generally avoided from military service because they are the largest metropolitan areas in Russia, and if they started to be heavily impacted by any sort of Russian central government actions, the Russian central government can directly be targeted because it's inside of Moscow and St. Petersburg for the large part. But beyond that, once again showing us really in a 3-in-1 kind of a perspective, things are not going well for the Russians even in just Ryazan alone as a city. The power plant did take a pretty significant hit. We aren't really sure if it's online again or has been repaired from the damages that were sustained. We certainly know that it would be a bit of a stretch to say that the Ryazan refinery may have been brought online from the last attack, because the last attack did hit some crucial components on some of the condensing towers, which we do understand would have knocked out this refinery for several weeks while they were trying to repair those parts and eventually find replacements, and then get the entire refinery back up and running. And then directly to the west of all that, you can see the cemeteries that are continuing to grow from Russia's endless war in Ukraine. And while the Russians are claiming victory, I would have to say that the growing cemeteries, which are filled with the solemn silence of the dead, are largely showing that it's not necessarily the case that the Russians are doing incredibly well in the war so far. But moving on from all of that and out of the Ryazan area, we were also able to see another attack that occurred within the Tula Oblast. The Tula Oblast is a bit of a special one because anyone who's an arms collector or is interested in Russian firearms or Soviet firearms will know that the Tula arms manufactory, seen right here on this little island on the Upper River, is one that produces a fairly large amount of the firearms that have been seen in Soviet history and even in the modern Russian Federation to some extent from this very manufactory right here. The reason why they've always been able to produce weapons so well inside the city of Tula is because most of the factory is on the upper, or on uppas. They've always been able to...
Come on, man. Not the dad joke. Come on.
They've always been able to produce a large amount of firearms because of that massive benefit that they get from the Upper River, which is full of nothing but uppas, not downers. But one other thing that is a little interesting about the Tula Oblast is that a depot was hit within Tula recently, and it does appear that some significant damage was caused, possibly knocking out a couple of the tanks or the drums that the oil or refined fuel products was being held in. And we can also see the
video quality will be terrible, by the way. Just want to make sure you knew that.
The video quality is going to be of a potato, but we can see a better picture that was taken showing the damage to one of the tanks later on in the day. So it does appear that the Russian Federation did take some pretty decent hits again last night from the Ukrainians, but this is nothing in comparison, mind you, to a little hit that was sustained in a totally different conflict, in a totally different area of the world that we have to get to because I have to keep the joke fresh before I forget about it and then it gets too late into the stream and people aren't here for the punchline. So we are going to move on down out of the Ukraine war and largely the conflict up there for just a moment, and we're going to move on down to one that's still boiling under the surface, or really has been for pretty much the entire time that most of y'all have been alive. The Iran-Israel war, which is largely a proxy conflict fought in between the Israelis and then against Iran's proxy forces such as Hezbollah, Hamas, or the Yemeni Houthis. One thing that is really interesting is that not too long ago, in the city of Beirut, which some would claim is largely not aligned with Hezbollah, the Israelis conducted an airstrike, and that airstrike ended up taking out the leader of Hezbollah, which is called Nasrallah. And we've always said here on this channel that on that day, Nasrallah got hit in his schnozrallah. But crazily enough, for months now, they actually didn't have an official funeral for Nasrallah. I really do not know what happened with that. I'll be honest with you, I'm not really sure if they embalmed his body and had it on display for a couple of months, or whether he had already been buried and then they had his official funeral now. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not really sure if they buried his body and then exhumed it and then had the official funeral today. I'm not entirely sure what went on with this, but they did have the funeral, the only funeral I've seen so far for Nasrallah today. And it does appear that a little bit of an unexpected thing happened in the middle of the funeral. So we'll be showing y'all some of it. And here we can see the funeral. Interestingly enough, I do want to point this out because this is something that I always find so interesting, because we knew some people who were from this neck of the woods, and they always said, oh, no one in Beirut actually supports Hezbollah. That would be ridiculous. Like, Hezbollah is just like a fringe group kind of in southern Lebanon. They have an entire football stadium nearly filled with hundreds of thousands of people, it appears, that are pretty much cheering on the funeral and really kind of treating Nasrallah like a martyr for their cause. But there was a little bit of a shock that came in the middle of all this here. Let me see if I can get the video quality up here. Actually, this is the highest it gets, so it was filmed on a potato, like most videos from this region are. But you see them here. We see the procession moving through.
Oh,
dude,
no.
Everyone,
it's the Israelis.
Everyone on that hearse, dude, literally looked up like this. Like, they were like, oh, like,
they really did, though. You know, that's got to be intimidating. That looked like, what, 5 or 6 F-35s flying right over? Just right over their heads. Nobody saw it coming.
4 F-35s. So 5 or 6 is kind of close, but we're not good at the math that much. But I believe that might be 4. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not that good at math. But flew right over. And then it sounds like the crowd's trying to recover, and they're sounding a little angry.
They weren't angry at first, though. They were scared crapless. They didn't know what to do.
Dude, they sat there and literally went, oh. Like, bro, dude, they turned into that meme of Willem Dafoe looking up into the sky, you know, like fear. Like, that was them for like 5 seconds. But we also got to see, really interestingly enough, that the Israelis actually took pictures of this little move that they did today right over the middle of this stadium. And here they are actually flying over, and you wouldn't believe this, that's Beirut down there below. It looks like some of the buildings still have sustained damage from the 2020 explosion. It's been 5 years. You know, you got to give the Lebanese a bit of a break. You know, maybe they're a little bit too busy being run by a terrorist organization and largely backing them up. But nevertheless, we could see them conducting the little flyover right there. If you want to know exactly where that is right over this little area of Beirut, and it's right over the little airport. Isn't that cute? Isn't that cute? It's the Beirut Rafik Hariri International Airport, and they were flying right over it. You can actually see that little breakwater right here where it was in the picture. So see, look, there's that little puddle of water over there, the breakwater near to the runway, and there it is right there. So they literally flew right over the international airport. Wild. Moving on into the next picture, we then got to see them flying over a part of the procession. You can see that right there. It appears to be a larger park. We might actually be able to find that here. And yeah, it's right here. Here it is. So it appears that the funeral procession was held inside of this massive stadium right here. They call it the Kurva. Some of the Czechs might know that word. Sud Beirut. So it's the, so just to translate this to y'all, it appears that the first word is Czech, the second word is Spanish, and then the third word is in English. So if we were to translate the Czech word, the Spanish word, and then the English word into one statement, this is Bitch South Beirut. So that appears to be the stadium that this event was held at. And I'd have to say that Nasrallah certainly was the bitch of the South, for sure. He went out like one when the Israelis conducted the airstrike. But beyond that, we can see the massive crowds of people who are out here, and they are spanning all the way down pretty much to the coast in Beirut, and all the way up to Bitch South Beirut Stadium, which is right there in the middle of the city. But we did get to see the picture was taken, and we could see one of the F-35s flying over right there. This would be about the time, to remind everyone, that was in the clip from the earlier video where they looked up and saw the F-35s flying over. This picture was taken at that exact moment by the Israelis. And then a final picture here, we can see that this one actually predates the last picture, probably by a couple of seconds, but you can see that the entire area down there is filled with supporters of Hezbollah. It appears that at least hundreds of thousands of them showed up into central Beirut for this funeral procession that was going on at that moment. A little bit.
That really is crazy because you hear a lot of people saying that nobody in Lebanon supports Hezbollah or any of these Iranian proxy groups. But the fact that there's this many people showing up, I mean, to me, it looks like the contrary. That's kind of shocking. It's shocking on one aspect, but I take that back. Actually, it's not that shocking. It's really, honestly, this is the truth of it right here is what you're seeing.
It really isn't that shocking because if you listen to the people that we listen to, they would have you believe that nobody actually supports this stuff in Lebanon, and then they also post stuff on Twitter talking about Lebanese people are going to fight Americans and Israelis until their last dying breath, as long as they have a gun. So like it really is pretty much, from what I can assert, the majority of Lebanon supports Hezbollah at this point. Like that's largely what I can tell, and it really doesn't matter the kinds of differences that people want to point out in ideology or religion. In our general experience, we've seen that Lebanese, largely across the board, pretty much support Hezbollah regardless of their religious or ideological affiliations. But nevertheless, it is nice to see that the Israelis did do a little show of force and kind of reminded them why the whole procession was being done today. But nevertheless, it does appear that many people have been talking about this little Israeli maneuver that's been done today. And it seems as though a lot of people were wondering, were the Israelis considering striking the place? And it appears that the majority answer was absolutely not, and it was most likely a show of force. A lot of people are saying that no, that would have been way too extreme. Others are saying, yeah, maybe the Israelis were considering it, and some are unsure and undecided. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So it looks like 52% of the audience said, it was really just purely a show of force, and it was not really a strike to begin with, while 29% said, yes, Israel probably considered striking the area, and 14% said, no, it would have been too extreme. And honestly, I'm sure Israel probably thought about it. Like, I'm sure there was somebody that probably brought it up. But the truth is, there's a lot of civilians in the area, and this is like basically central Beirut, it looks like. So this would have been an interesting place to drop massive ordnance. So, of course, there were a lot of Hezbollah down there, which would have, of course, been a good opportunity to take them out. But it was just probably too risky to carry that through. So instead, they did the next best thing, which was sending in these highly advanced fighter jets, fly them right over their heads, and roar it right over their heads and let them know that they could be struck. But they simply gave them a pass that day. And as you can see, many of them were horrified on the ground, even though they tried to act like they weren't after they flew over. A lot of them went perfectly silent because they weren't sure what was about to happen. So I'm sure that scared them to their core, actually. But I'm with the 52%. And Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say I would be with the 52% as well. It was certainly a show of force, and that was it alone. I would have to be honest with y'all. It's a pretty funny thing that they did. I mean, like, no holds barred. This was hilarious, actually. But the thing is that this really will not have an impact on anything. Like, this isn't going to be stopping Hezbollah from doing what Hezbollah does. I mean, Hezbollah gets bombed most of the time, and it doesn't really stop them from continuing what they're doing. So a little flyover, if anything, was pretty much just a way to honestly piss them off a little bit extra. He kind of rub it in that they bombed Nasrallah and his bunker into submission months ago, pretty much into the submission beyond the living. But beyond that, it was an interesting sight and one that we found extremely hilarious behind the scenes today, especially knowing that some people out there are going to be seething at the loss of Nasrallah, and also the fact that the Israelis practically disrespected him in front of its whole squad by flying over today at his own funeral. Kind of raining on the parade, but I guess you could say that they weren't bombing on this one. But moving on from that, and moving on from Cordova Sud Beirut, it's time for us to move back into the big news that we have outside the Middle East, because for now, the Middle East is just kind of middling, to be honest with all of y'all. There really isn't a lot of news coming out so far. We haven't seen the U.S. conducting any military operations against the Yemeni Houthis. We haven't seen Israel conducting any military operations against the Islamic Republic of Iran for the development of their nuclear weapons. And we also have not seen the Israelis conducting any further actions against the Gaza Strip in an attempt to forcibly displace millions of people. And we also haven't seen much news coming out of the Syrian interim government, or Lebanon for that matter. So beyond this bit of news that we got today, just to, once again, let y'all know that we're keeping apprised of all the situations in the Middle East, there isn't a lot going on as of today. It's been a fairly slow day in the Middle East. But moving on from that, And out of that area, I guess you could say, Matthew, that the Middle East is a little mid. I got them from TOT.
It is
Like,
a little mid. It honestly is mid at this point. You know, it's kind of rare for the Middle East to be mid because it's been popping off for the last couple of years, actually. And all of a sudden, it's gone kind of mid, which is unusual. But it'll only be that way for a short while. It never stays mid in the Middle East. I'm sure that once we start bombing Iran, or also once we start bombing Yemen here in a couple of days, it's probably going to pop off bigly, as they would say.
It probably will. Man, I remember, though, during the Syrian civil war, things were popping off massive. Like, everyone was like, oh my God, they're collapsing. Like, that was one of the biggest things that's happened recently. But something will pick up here. I can tell you all that. The Middle East is never quiet for too long, ever these days. Something will pick up, and there will be news for us to cover down there. It's just today was a little bit of a slower day. But moving on from that and out of the Middle East, it's now time for us to move on back into Ukraine, or specifically things pertaining to Ukraine. And that's moving us into the diplomatic world today, because this actually has a lot to do with the position that we're seeing the Russians on the ground in, which is not looking great. In fact, it's looking worse today than it has really any other day so far of the Ukrainian counterattacks. But we were able to hear, before we even get into any of that the British are now going to be rolling forward brand new sanctions, as the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland will ban entry to individuals who provide significant support to the Russian state or owe their wealth to the Russian state, under new sanctions that are set to be announced tomorrow, according to Reuters. It does appear that the Russian Federation is going to be not having a great friend in the United Kingdom, which has largely been the case. The British have actually been the first to action in supporting Ukraine throughout most of the conflict, and it appears that the United Kingdom is going to be continuing on with their sanction regimens and even trying to create stricter sanction regimens than we have seen in the past. This is also coming at the exact same time, I didn't put this news bulletin down, but we did hear this, that the French President Emmanuel Macron and the British Prime Minister will be flying to the United States of America here within the next few days to team up together to speak to the President of the United States to try and encourage him not to abandon Ukraine, but instead to continue on the war and beat the Russians further into submission until they're actually humbled enough to see decent compromises in the West's interest at the end of the conflict. We, of course, are not going to know how that's going to go, but we do know that that sort of a diplomatic meeting will be held most likely in Washington, D.C. here within the next few days. But that moves us all into the diplomatic situation that's going on inside of Ukraine right now. Many of y'all will know, and it would pretty much be completely ignorant for anyone to really not mention this, that U.S.-Ukrainian relations are not as good as they've ever been. In fact, one could say that they're about as bad now as they ever really were. Statements have been made over the past week or two, really the past week and a half, really, by the President of the United States and other members of the U.S. government, largely condemning the state of Ukraine as a dictatorship run by President Volodymyr Zelensky that doesn't have honest elections, and largely blaming the war in Ukraine on the state of Ukraine, and then later on backtracking and saying that actually the Ukrainians were invaded, but it's their fault for being invaded, and they shouldn't have just let themselves get invaded in the first place. Many people will know that things have not been that great, and some people have been resorting to some of the goofiest things that I've ever seen. Some people are now acting like the state of Ukraine is just a irredeemable child of Damien and it has to be destroyed. And other people are saying that the United States has provided no support to Ukraine whatsoever, not even a cent, and the Ukrainians have made it entirely on their own and pretty much telling the United States to shove it, although a lot of people do understand that U.S. support has been a major contributing factor to Ukraine's success on the battlefield over 3 years. Out of all of that, one thing that really hasn't been seen incredibly well is that the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, has made any comments to any of those statements. We really haven't seen any, at least any larger ones, beyond the fact that Zelensky has said in the past that any negotiations or settlements that are made in between Russia and the United States that do not involve Ukraine or Europe would not be accepted because the Ukrainians have to be involved in negotiations about ending the war that they are a part of and a defending member of. We were able to hear, however, that Zelensky has come out and made a lot of clarifying statements today, and a lot of them were incredibly interesting. For one, we were able to hear that U.S.-Russian talks have been happening the whole time. Zelensky actually said that today. The U.S. and Russia have held non-public negotiations throughout the war. That's true, and now they have become public. That was a direct statement from Volodymyr Zelensky today at a press conference that was held inside of Ukraine. It is
Well,
impossible.
if they've been holding negotiations throughout the whole war, then how come they haven't made any progress at all? It's like, and what makes them think that they're going to make progress now? All of a sudden that they said it publicly.
That's a good question. Like honestly, it shows that the Russians are completely, unreasonable, and there's not going to be any progress on this. And I have a feeling that in the end, although we were completely wrong on the position that the president of the United States made, we might end up being correct in the long run. That the U.S. really has no option but to continue the war in Ukraine, because it's either that or completely cave into everything that Russia wants. And that might not even be possible, in the big picture of things. But we were able to hear another quote by Zelensky where he did state, "It is impossible to decide about Ukraine without us," meaning Ukraine. We do not recognize such decisions. And it does appear that Zelensky is still remaining adamant that no matter what the United States and Russia talk about or agree about, Ukraine has to be involved, otherwise it means nothing. And that makes a lot of sense, because there's no such thing as ending a war or negotiating a peace to a war when one of the active parties in the conflict isn't even involved in the negotiations or agrees to anything, or much less was actually speaking about what they are looking for at the end of this conflict or compromise. So it appears that the Ukrainians are remaining adamant on those statements. We also were able to hear another thing that was interesting from Zelensky, which has confirmed, shockingly enough, we did get clarification to something today that was very well brought up in the past, that a Ukrainian minister stated that U.S. arms sales had been shut off to Ukraine, and that Ukraine was getting no military support beyond that point. We then heard another Ukrainian minister come out and say that that's completely untrue, and arms shipments are continuing. And up from then, which was about 2 days ago, up till now, there really wasn't a clear answer to that, and we've been waiting for some sort of a larger clarification, and we were able to get that clarification from Zelensky himself. And we were able to hear that right here at this press conference. And once again, the video quality is incredibly low. I don't understand why it's 244p, and this was on Twitter. I have no clue why. But anyways, we will play the clip and let y'all hear the direct quote from Zelensky, as he did state that U.S. support is continuing for now, but there's no new aid packages being created for Ukraine to help them to continue on the war effort. So here is the statement from Zelensky.
Друге, допомога зупиниться. Дивіться, зараз допомога є, хоча треба справедливо сказати, ця допомога, вона стара, це минулих часів, так, підтримка Конгресу Сполучених Штатів Америки, але двопартійна підтримка республіканців і демократів. Ми вдячні, що її не зупинили, але через повільнення постачання вона все ще йде. Так, і там, чесно кажучи, ми ще можемо отримати, бо проголосували набагато більше, там 15 мільярдів в дорозі, якщо чесно. Вийшли, не вийшли, щось вийшло, щось десь знаходиться на шляху. У зброї і в різних технічних засобах ці гроші. Тобто тому нічого не зупинено, але нічого нового і не проголошено. Ми в цьому сьогодні, ось де ми знаходимося, так?
And that's the end of that statement from Zelensky, but we just hit the goal!
We hit the goal! Let's go! Jaga, Igor! That's what I'm talking about. We smashed the goal. And look at that. It's already $200 above it within like seconds. That's crazy. But we have smashed the goal yet again. A big shout out to the LSA.
Absolutely incredible right there. And a massive shout out to the Lee Spring Army for the huge support to the fundraiser tonight, and once again helping to see that the Lee Spring Army does its part in supporting Western and American interests around the globe and continuing to help out Ukraine in the little way that we can. That is going to be hopefully helping out a Ukrainian soldier that's been wounded on the battlefield to be able to walk again, or to be able to use his arms and legs again, or to be able to find a replacement for those if he lost one of those somehow. But nevertheless, I gotta say that that's absolutely amazing and incredible to see that the Lee Spring Army has once again pulled through and hit another fundraiser goal. Absolutely undefeated over the entirety of the war so far. Truly incredible. But nevertheless, while we are hearing that the Lee Spring Army is still continuing to support Ukraine, we are hearing that right now the United States is still continuing to support Ukraine because of prior approved aid packages. And this is something that I have to explain. The aid packages that have already been approved, $15 billion worth, about at this point, has not been sent. are still going to be sent to Ukraine because they've already gone through the process of being approved funding-wise, and there's really not a way to stop that too much. These spending, I guess you could say, aid packages were created in the Congress, approved by the House and the Senate, and then signed off on by the President of the United States during the last administration. This means that there's really no way to reverse that because it's already gotten the approval of the Congress and the executive, and so for this reason, that aid is still allotted and earmarked to be sent to Ukraine, so that way the Ukrainian armed forces can continue to fight the conflict. So that means that right now, the Ukrainians are watching as the $15 billion of unsent military equipment is continuing to flow to Ukraine, maybe at a trickle or maybe at a decent amount. That's really not up to the point right now, but it's still trickling. The issue that Ukraine is saying that there is that there are no new aid packages that are being made, meaning that once that $15 billion worth of military aid and support finally fizzles out, Ukraine will not be getting any military equipment or supplies from that point forward, meaning that right then and there, U.S. military aid and support will have actually been cut off by that point because there will be no further support either through funding approved by the Congress or unilaterally approved by the president from executive funds. So it does appear that at this point, Ukraine has a bit of a ticking time bomb above its head. For the future, for at least probably the next half year, the United States will continue to send military equipment and supplies to Ukraine, as well as the Europeans, but once that time passes, then it's going to be entirely on Europe for the large part, unless the situation changes with the United States, to be able to supply all arms and equipment that the Ukrainians would need to be able to continue to fight the conflict. Another thing
Now, technically, even though the United States is already committed to sending this extra aid that was already approved, couldn't the U.S. president currently try to freeze that if he decided to really mess with Ukraine really badly? Let's say the talks keep going sideways between Zelensky and the United States government. Couldn't he still freeze it?
I believe he can. I think you're the government expert, and I believe that there is a way he can freeze it. But wouldn't there be an issue with that, though, Matthew? Because considering that that was approved by the Congress and also signed off by the prior president, that would be possibly fairly difficult, considering it's gotten the approval of both branches unilaterally at the time the funding was approved to be able to freeze it.
Well, I think all it would actually require is actually a new order by the current president to rescind the prior order of the past president. I think it's pretty flexible to my understanding. I may be wrong in that, but I think it's pretty flexible when it comes to rescinding those orders like that, because the prior administration used the presidential drawdown authority to actually approve the sending of funds to Ukraine. And that was, of course, approved by Congress before it got to the president's desk. So I'm pretty sure that he could rescind it if he chose to, which of course is risky because once again, the relations are really rocky between Zelensky and the United States right now. So technically it could be rescinded. I personally doubt it would be, but it is a possibility, I think.
I would have to say, I think that probably would be the case, that they probably most likely would end up not trying to mess with that, and the support will continue. So I don't really think it would be that big of an issue or a consideration, really, that we have to think deeply about. So I think it would be fine in that metric. So moving on from that, though, a lot of people have also been hearing about some other statements that have been made by Zelensky today, which I didn't include on the map because we have so much to cover. So trust me, bro, on this, and if you want any corroboration on it, go to our Twitter, because we did post the direct quotes there from Zelensky. So I'm going to be briefly summarizing some of the big statements that were made by Zelensky today that are really showing that the state of Ukraine is making some pretty decent efforts and measures to try and smooth over the diplomatic relations in between the current administration in the United States and the state of Ukraine, and also position Ukraine well into the future. The first statement that Zelensky made is that he did not care that the president of the United States called him a dictator. He said, that's totally fine if he thinks that I'm not a dictator, but, maybe there's some sort of a frustration there that the U.S. has with how the war in Ukraine has been going, and we can largely find some common ground on that. We would like to see that the United States would continue on with supporting Ukraine into the future, because we all have a common enemy against the Russian Federation. It was a very diplomatic statement that was then followed up immediately by an additional statement from Zelensky saying that if Ukraine gets into NATO, if the United States and every country in NATO would unilaterally vote Ukraine, well, all together pretty much, vote Ukraine into NATO, which is what's required to get into NATO, Zelensky would step down and resign immediately as president of Ukraine. Now, this is a statement that's actually a class act of a statement, because, one, I'll explain this. It sounds incredibly good, but there's no chance in hell of that happening. But it's a win-win, so I'll explain a little bit of how it will work. One, the United States has made it very clear that they are not wanting Ukraine in NATO, but the Russian Federation has also made it very clear that really the only thing they care about is the quote-unquote Nazi Zelensky and his Nazi government in Ukraine, and if they're gone, then the whole war isn't even that, well, really the fact that Ukraine's in NATO wouldn't even really be a big problem to them. That's the kind of talking point that Putin and the Russian government is putting out right now. So what Zelensky is saying with this statement today is, if we get into NATO, which the Russians supposedly care nothing about at all, then me and my supposed Nazi government will step down and allow for another government to take our place of any type and any variety. It could be Russian aligned, it could be American aligned, it could be neutral, but we would be gone and out of the picture. It sets up Ukraine wildly well, because now it's going to have to make the Russians waffle on their prior really propaganda statements and diplomatic claims, because now they're going to have to say, well, actually, we don't really care about Zelensky's government, we actually really care about them getting into NATO. And it really moves the entire diplomatic talking point arena into a totally different metric that moves away from Zelensky being the crux of the issue and actually moves it right into Ukraine's NATO membership and becoming a Western aligned country being the primary issue. And that means, and it's almost like a move that was seen at another time, actually, to tell you all this. This was one that was very funny to me back in the day. So back when NATO was founded, which was way back in the day, a long time ago in 1949, NATO was supposed to be a collective security organization to protect European countries from outright war. And what was funny about that is that NATO actually doesn't have any parameters to who can join. As long as you're within the area of Europe, you can be anybody and you can apply to join NATO. So the Soviet Union did something that actually was pretty smart at the time. They applied for NATO membership. And the whole point that the Soviet Union did that was so that way they could prove that the NATO alliance wasn't being made as a collective security organization that was supposed to ensure peace across the whole of Europe. It was being made as a collective defense organization to protect the whole of Europe against the Soviet Union. And of course, the Soviet Union was blocked from joining NATO, largely by the United States of America. And it made it incredibly clear to pretty much everyone else around the world, and also the Soviet Union, that this was not supposed to be any kind of a security alliance to maintain the peace in Europe. It was supposed to maintain the peace against the Soviet Union and ensure that they wouldn't be able to steamroll each non-Soviet or non-communist country in Europe one at a time. It's almost a similar move like that. It really is a catch-22, because either the Russians can say, actually, that's fine, and they can give up their strategic interest in Ukraine and see that Ukraine becomes a NATO member, or they have to say that Zelensky being the president really doesn't matter at all, and as a matter of fact, it really is about the fact that Ukraine is going to become a Western aligned country, and Russia has larger imperial ambitions that they're trying to pursue, and so it really has nothing to do with the supposed ideological battle that they're fighting against Zelensky, who's supposed to be a dictator, supposedly. I have to say that this was a very smart move, and not only that, it makes Zelensky on a world sphere look incredibly good. Because as many of y'all will know, a lot of people don't really look into this kind of a deal and go over it with a fine comb like we do. Most people just kind of look at this and they see headlines and they don't even read the articles. So with that in mind, Zelensky today has made it look like he's willing to sacrifice himself to the majority of the public because they'll only be reading the headlines, so that way the state of Ukraine will be secure into the future. So with all of that put together, this was a win-win for Ukraine today in every way. They're going to force the Russians to either accept that or completely back off of their current propaganda claims and negotiating claims and have to spin them a different way, which will show that the Russians are very insincere with their current diplomatic posturing. And also it's showing that Zelensky would be more than willing to sacrifice himself for the state of Ukraine. So with all that combined, this actually was a very good move by Zelensky today on a diplomatic level. And a lot of people have been talking about it, and it looks like most people are saying that this was a class act, simply put, by Zelensky, and some others are saying that this was meaningless in practice. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So it looks like 54% of the audience said Zelensky is a class act, very simply, while 31% said that is meaningless in practice, and 7% said Ukraine will likely get into NATO now. And honestly, one thing I have to say, so sort of unfortunately, is that Ukraine will probably not be getting into NATO anytime soon. That is probably not on the horizon. So even though this was a very noble statement to make, I don't think that Ukraine will be put into NATO. And once again, Zelensky's been taking a very, very, I guess you could say, sort of like friendly approach to dealing with the current smear statements coming out of the United States from the U.S. government. And of course, we do know that the president called Zelensky a dictator. And this is basically a way to prove, hey, look, I'm not a dictator. I'm willing to step down if you're willing to save my country. So that sort of like shot the whole argument to hell, basically, about him being a dictator, because typically dictators don't offer to step down. It's usually not what they do. So that was proving the current president of the United States to be completely wrong on that. So I would say that even though this technically really doesn't mean anything in practice, it was a very good statement to make, or a good action to show that Ukraine is acting in good faith and they're trying to be as humble as possible. So I'm with the 54%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be with the 54% as well. It was a class act move. I like, just being honest with everyone. It means nothing, and nothing will come out of it, to be entirely honest. But the kind of statement that is, and the implications of it, are incredibly profound. Because would you see, like for example, an equal argument here, would you see Putin say, if we could get good terms that are a good compromise here to end the needless sacrifice of the Russian people, I will step down as president of the Russian Federation for good? Would you ever see a statement like that come out of Putin? No, not even if he knew that nothing would come out of it. He still wouldn't make a statement like that, because he's been the president of the Russian Federation since the year 2000. He's been a president for a quarter of a century of Russia. So that would never happen. So it makes Zelensky look incredibly good, even if this isn't a statement that's actionable in any way for anyone involved, because the Russians are going to refuse to allow Ukraine in NATO, even if Zelensky stepped down. And the Russian Federation would continue to insist that they are not allowed in NATO, even if Zelensky was the president or not. And that moves the whole metric into, well, now the Russians are incredibly insincere. Zelensky being the president and having the supposed dictatorship in charge of Ukraine isn't their problem. Their problem is the fact that Ukraine just exists as a neutrally aligned or Western aligned country that isn't under Russia's thumb. That moves the understanding about the Ukraine war into a totally different sphere than it already is at this point. And another thing that it throws out there is that it makes Zelensky look like a selfless hero for the large part of Ukraine. He's willing to pretty much sacrifice himself, according to what the public ire is against him at this point, for the benefit of his nation. Which, you know, who in the world can look at someone like that and say that this is a bad guy? You know, that kind of an action is something that you really wouldn't ever see out of most other leaders, except for one that you would have to assume actually does care for the country and the people of Ukraine. But I hope that does address that the best I can, at least on the diplomatic analysis of what that would look like, because it does largely appear it's been received that way throughout most of the internet, unless if you're looking at the raving lunatics who, you know, just hate him to hate him and will never listen to reason, and then they always are going to hate him. I mean, hell, Zelensky could quite literally sacrifice his life for the country of Ukraine, and those people would still hate him. So, you know, that is what it is. But beyond that, though, one thing I do have to say is that the fundraiser has reached a whopping $2.5 thousand nearly tonight, which is absolutely incredible. Absolutely
Fantastic.
Amazing, as a matter of fact. Unbelievable. And not only that, we've nearly had 10,000 people here for about 30 minutes or so. Really crazy on that as well. But before we move on into the remainder of the news that we have out of Ukraine, really the frontline news, I want to make sure that we call off those top donors of the fundraiser tonight with the massive amount that's been fundraised, and also that we address a couple of questions, because loads of people have had tons of questions that I've seen in the live chat. And once again, a reminder to everyone, tonight is a fundraiser night. We do not have any super chats to address, so it is raw live chat questions. If you throw in a live chat question and it is a good one, the chances are fairly high that it'll get answered tonight. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so we've got some absolutely massive donations that came in tonight, and our first one goes to James Hughes, who put in a $200 donation, the largest one of the night, and huge shout out to James for that massive generosity to the fundraiser. Also, we have a 111 from Barry Woodward, also massive, as well as a 100 from The Enforcer, as well as Activista, Peace with War, Howell Rose, and Greg Carrier, who all put in $100 donations. We also had a 75 from Old Warrior and a 69, nice, from Bubba Conway, as well as a 50 from John King and Susan Janowski, and a 50 from Nightmare Before Christmas, as well as Focus and Resist, along with Mark Young, Axel K, Kathleen Bishop, BC Skyman, and also Andy L. And once again, a huge shout out to everybody tonight for once again helping us to reach the goal and then some. We're currently about $450 away, or actually above our goal right now. While I see a bot that caught my attention, let me get him real quick. But anyways, we're almost $500 above the goal, and that's tremendous to see. And once again, a huge shout out to everybody in the chat and on the live stream as well. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say a huge shout out to everyone who supported the fundraiser so far tonight. The support has been absolutely amazing. And I think that's been going on all the way up until today, which, by the way, I forgot to mention. This is just something I totally forgot. This is actually the anniversary of the war in Ukraine today. Like right now. Actually, no. No, it wouldn't be. It would not be. Because if that is the case, then the map wouldn't be red, it would be green. But technically today, the 23rd of February, would be the day that the war in Ukraine started. But, excuse me.
Bless you.
But right now, it would have been starting, let's see, about an hour ago at this point, around 3 years ago. So as of today, we're now entering the 4th year of the war. It's really crazy to think that. I didn't even remember to mention that to all of y'all because the days just keep passing on by over and over and over, and a lot of them end up looking like similar days. But nevertheless, it's just wild to think that today is the day that it began. And also, I see Cookie say the 24th of February of 2022. Well, a lot of y'all are saying that, but here's the thing. That was the 24th of February of 2022 back in 2022. And in our time zone, that would have been the 23rd of February because Ukraine is about 9 to 10 hours ahead of us. So when it's the 23rd of February here in the United States, like it is right now, it is actually the 24th of February over in Ukraine right now, and that's when the war actually began for them. So I know that that's a little bit confusing. That's something that we actually confused on the 1-year anniversary of the war in Ukraine because we actually missed it by a day. We ran the 1-year anniversary stream for the first year of the war on the 24th of February inside the United States, which by that point was the 25th of February inside of Ukraine when our stream ran. So we were actually a day late to the party as far as the 1-year anniversary. Excuse me, bless me. Sorry.
You.
I don't
bless
know.
You. Jeez, man, a little epidemic going on here.
Oh, man. Oh, man, I ate a bird today. Oh, man, I get a respect around here. But beyond that, it's really crazy to think that it has been 3 entire years of war as of today. And now starting as of right now, really an hour ago, we're now moving into the 4th year of the war. So really crazy to think. And I got to give a massive shout out to all of y'all for supporting this fundraiser tonight. Because for 3 straight years now, full on, we have supported these fundraisers and done a massive amount of good, helping out and supporting Western American interests around the entirety of the world. And I got to thank y'all so much once again for continuing to keep that alive and continuing to keep this thing, the fundraisers at least, rolling all the way on into the 1,100th day of the war nearly. And so with that, I hope I was able to give y'all a huge thanks and a massive showing of gratitude to all of y'all continuing to support these fundraisers. And it's time for us to move into a couple of live chat questions. So, Matthew, what do we got?
All right. So first of all, let's get to a poll that's running right now because this is a hot topic that people are talking about right now. The poll says Zelensky says he does not recognize the $500 billion in debt that the United States claims that Ukraine owes to the United States. And the big question is, should Ukraine pay the U.S. back? So it looks like 52% said no, Ukraine isn't required to pay back anything, while 25% said it would be nice but not required, and 19% said yes, Ukraine should pay the U.S. back. And first of all, we have to clear this up as well. No $500 billion has been sent to Ukraine. There's no number out there that supports that. And that was a claim stated by the United States government, which is not backed up by fact. That's number one. Number two is any money that was sent to Ukraine was sent as a grant. It was not sent as a loan. And if the United States wanted to get its money back, then it should have structured that as a loan from the beginning. That's number two. And number three is we cannot now start retroactively demanding that money back since it was a grant. It was basically a gift from the United States. And even though it would be nice for Ukraine to eventually pay something back, it shouldn't be $500 billion. It should be closer to what they actually received, if not much less. And once again, Ukraine is not required to repay it because it was not a loan. So if the United States wants to start getting paid back from this point forward, they must start structuring it as a loan because we can't go back and change what's been done in the past. That's not fair nor right to Ukraine. And once again, if we're requiring Ukraine to pay back money, then why not say Israel needs to pay back money as well? Because everybody should be treated the same. Why is Ukraine being singled out? But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree. Ukraine is not required to pay back a cent of the support that we've sent so far. All of it, for a large part. I believe there is a small outlier of a couple of billion that was sent as some form of a lend-lease, but practically all of the equipment that we have sent and support that we've sent to Ukraine has been in the form of grants or aid packages that were approved with absolutely no concept of being repaid. The fact of the matter is, I don't even know why we would want to be repaid, because it's not like the equipment that we gave them actually has any real value. All of that equipment that we gave to Ukraine was slated within the next few years after we gave it to Ukraine to be destroyed here in the United States or buried in the middle of a desert somewhere. Meaning, as far as we were concerned, that equipment really had no value at all. We were getting rid of it. Like, we were just going to go and throw it into the desert somewhere and let it rot. And instead, we decided to give it to Ukraine and then just use as a good excuse to start producing new military equipment to replace the old that we're giving to Ukraine. That's what we did. And that's why we largely didn't even expect repayment on it, because we were taking the value of these old, beat up, worn down American vehicles, and for the larger part, worn out artillery systems and older shells that we no longer wanted to use and were going to dispose of because they had gotten too old, and we were giving them to Ukraine. So we would go through and because everyone will know that even if you have a beater car, it has some kind of value. So, say when you originally bought the car, it cost like 25 grand, but nowadays it's only worth 5 grand. Well, if the Congress approves that we're going to send them 20 grand worth of military equipment, you can get like $5,000 beater cars that originally were worth 20 something grand but are only worth about 5,000 and are practically useless at this point, and then send them over to Ukraine. Or what would be better, just throwing it off into the desert. At that point, it still has absolutely no value. So we were never expecting on getting anything back on sending this stuff to Ukraine. And not only that, you can't retroactively go back and try and get money out of something. That's just not how it works. Like, if one of y'all is down on your luck and you ask someone to give you some money because you need some help with paying rent, and someone gives you $100 and says, "Oh, don't worry about it. Yeah, you don't have to repay me. That's totally fine. You can just have it." And then they get pissed off with you 6 months later, and then they say, "By the way, I want my $100 back with about $20 in interest on top of it right now." You would go, "Well, you didn't tell me that at the beginning. You told me that you were just giving it to me not to worry about it." And then you'd say, "Hey, you're some kind of an asshole." And then you'd be in your rights to say it. And Zelensky's saying it a lot more diplomatically by saying, there was no repayment that was required when this money was given. It was just given, and you really can't.
And also, it was a lawful thing. Like the prior president had the lawful authority to do these presidential drawdowns on the Ukraine aid funds and send the equipment. Like, it's not like it was illegal or something. So it has to be upheld what the last president did. When he sent the equipment, he sent it free of charge, not expecting repayment, like we've been saying. So, there's no legal grounds for it. There's no justice at all in this situation for demanding to get repaid for something that we didn't expect repayment on. It's just the concept itself is wild. And also, if we're going to approach it like that, like I mentioned, how come we're not going to Taiwan or going to Israel and saying, we gave you money in the past under the last administration. Now we want some of that money back. Why are we not doing that to everybody? Why is it being Ukraine singled out?
Man, remember back in the day, though, this is one that I remember. We were sitting there and we were watching the war in Ukraine, and they approved like that $100-something billion military aid package internationally. And we're like, oh, Ukraine must be about to get a killing from that. And it was like Israel gets 60 billion, Ukraine gets like 30, and then Taiwan gets 10. And I was like, wait a minute, we got like our priorities completely reversed. It's like Israel should be getting the least. I was like, what are we doing? I was like, it's like the way it should have been is 60 billion to Ukraine, 30 billion to Taiwan, and then 10 billion to Israel. Because if I'm remembering correctly, Israel had no problem bombing Hezbollah and Hamas into oblivion, and then not only that, taking on the Syrian interim government as soon as it formed a day later without breaking a sweat. So why in the world were they getting 60 billion and then everyone else was fighting for crumbs? I was like, that doesn't even really make any sense. And on top of that, another thing is that as far as military support goes from the United States that we give out almost as charity or party favors, the Israelis get hundreds of billions of dollars a year. And I never see us asking for any repayment from the Israelis. We give it to them, and we're more than happy to give it to them. But then we're having to protect our interest in Europe with Ukraine, per se. And it's a major conflict. It's the largest one that has been seen since World War II on a conventional level. Of course, not speaking about the Iran-Iraq war. But beyond that, it's the largest one seen in Europe since World War II, without a doubt. And then we're going to sit there and start going, we need to nickel and dime this whole thing, and then also get repaid fivefold of what we've sent in total in military and humanitarian aid to the state of Ukraine. That makes absolutely no sense. I don't really get it. And I also don't understand why we act like we have such a massive interest in being repaid, not only the full value, but pretty much 500% more than the total amount of money that we've sent to Ukraine, which was originally never supposed to be repaid. And then on top of that, act like that's something that we have to do because we can't afford it. Like, I just got a big question. Where in the world is this whole we can't afford it when the $1 trillion is put into Social Security every year, or better yet, the trillions of dollars are put into the infrastructure bills that we passed in the earlier part of the 2020s, or better yet, when we give, tens of billions of dollars or over $100 billion in military support to Israel every year, or anything else for that matter. Where in the world is the whole argument of we can't afford it and we have to make an instant pretty much return on investment to any of those spending bills?
Yeah.
There are none. Like, the only time I ever see anyone trying to make a stink about getting repaid for something is on Ukraine. And it seems like, to be honest, it seems to be singling out Ukraine and trying to come up with an issue that has never existed in government spending before. Like, another example.
Also not just getting repaid, by the way, because Zelensky came out today and exposed the actual terms of this mineral deal that's being discussed behind the scenes between the U.S. and Ukraine. And he said, basically, for every, let's say, for example, to illustrate it, let's say that the United States gives Ukraine $50 billion worth of assistance. The United States is demanded to get repaid $100 billion, which is basically doubling what Ukraine originally received, and they want that back as repayment. Since when is helping allies a money-making venture? It's like, fine to expect to get repaid back if that's what you want, but we're not going into it as like a business deal. This isn't about trying to make 100% returns. This is about making sure that's fair to us and also supporting our allies. The objective is not to make massive gains in like an investment style.
Also, another thing, like, here's something I gotta say, is that this is the main argument, and I want to defeat this one at the head, that's made against supporting Ukraine. We make no money and we're throwing money into a hole. So why don't we stop putting literally almost nothing into Ukraine? Like, when you look at it on a government spending level, $20 billion a year in military support to Ukraine is quite literally peanuts compared to everything else we spend. And let's spend that here at home, feeding the homeless, helping out veterans and things like that. But the thing I'm always looking at there, and I mean this, I do not mean any disrespect to the homeless or anyone else in terms of what the government gives them and supports them in terms of welfare, but at the same time, it's like, where's the return on investment on feeding the homeless? Like, if the concept is that Ukraine isn't giving us a return on investment, and somehow the government needs to be putting money into something like it's a business venture and then getting a return out of it that's larger than our initial investment, it's like, I'm fairly certain that paying the homeless is just kind of an act of goodwill, kind of like supporting Ukraine against our adversaries is, and there really isn't an expectation of getting repaid anytime soon. Like we don't sit there, like, if I remember correctly, I don't think the food stamp program says, okay, you get this much in food stamps. By the way, we expect to be repaid the value of the food stamps 200% at the end of every month for using the food stamps. I don't really think that's how a food stamps program or any kind of government welfare program works. And also, that makes no sense. Like, once again, that for some reason conducting an act in support of American strategic interests to ensure that the United States is economically successful at home due to the big strategic picture, that's a waste of money. But feeding the homeless, using that money, which also doesn't give a return if that's what we're really focused on, somehow that lack of return is now justified. Like, I'm not really understanding that one too much. And
it's like we're trying to turn the stage of geopolitics into like the loan shark stage or something. It's like we're trying to find like a new revenue source. We're not trying to make revenue off the wars. Like, on the United States level, our objective is not to go around the world making massive gains off of investing in foreign countries to ensure that they are defended properly. Because of course we're receiving an inherent benefit by supporting Ukraine to ensure that Europe won't be attacked. So we're getting a benefit out of it. To act like our only benefit is receiving an investment return, that's silly. That's very short-sighted and not looking at the whole picture. But once again, I think we all know why this is being done. It seems to be that Ukraine's being singled out because the leader of Ukraine is not favored by the current U.S. admin. That appears to be the case, because otherwise we'd be demanding our money back from everybody. So that's why it kind of pisses me off, because we're doing this just to Ukraine, just to mess with him. And it's screwing over the Ukrainian people. That's mainly who this is going to screw over. It's going to steal their revenue for the future. And it's all because there's an ego war going on between the two leaders here. And who always pays the price? It's the regular people.
And also, I see some people don't get the point I'm making here. And for some reason, no one, not no one, some people always don't ever want to get the point. So let me restate this again. The point in saying, why in the world are we going to divert the money from Ukraine because it's not making us a return on investment and feed the homeless when neither of them make a return on investment? It's not to say that feeding the homeless is bad. That's not supposed to be the objective of saying that. But the point is that there is a fallacy to the argument that is being made by the people who are against supporting Ukraine, and that somehow, some way, government investments or government expenditures are supposed to make a return profit. The fact of the matter is that really none of them make a return profit. Why should the government do anything? There's really no profit to anything that they do. When they pave an interstate, do they make money off of it? I don't see it. I don't really see any toll booths on most interstates throughout the state of Alabama. So technically, the federal government, in the categorical and block grants that they give to the state of Alabama for us to continue to pave those interstates that go through the state, they make nothing on those outright. Like, they just make them, and it's pretty much a public service that they don't make direct income off of by putting the money into the interstate itself. Now, I know a lot of people are about to say, but they make money off of the commerce that travels on the interstate, but that's not a direct result of producing the interstate. The way the government would be working an interstate right now, based off of the same way they're talking about Ukraine, is that every single several miles on an interstate, there would be a toll booth, and you would have to pay a fee to travel along the interstate, because there would have to be a return, an actual clear return on the investment on the use of the interstate alone. Or better yet, whenever a veteran gets a house from the Veterans Affairs, then they have to pay 100% of the value of the house back to the Veterans Affairs in a mortgage along with interest like any other person. At that point, the government isn't even, of course, helping out a veteran. They're pretty much giving out a mortgage to that veteran to get a house like any other person, and there's no inherent, I guess you could say, waste of taxpayers' dollars, if you want to put it that way. It's just about making money off of anyone that the government is involved in. And nothing works that way. Like, think about this as well. The National Park Service makes no money at all when you think about it. We throw money into maintaining wilderness. Like, literally just keeping it wild, which you would think would be absolutely free. But we pour tons of money into the National Park Service in this country simply for the fact we like the way the natural scenes of the United States looks in certain areas, and we would like for people to go and see it here and there. But when you think about it, that doesn't make a return on investment at all. Why doesn't the United States just build a water park in Yellowstone National Park or a Disney World there, so that way we can make a return on the investment that the government's putting into the national parks every year? Time and time again, every single time you look at anything that the government does, there's never an expectation on a return of investment. The U.S. government isn't run like a business where it's making financial ventures and investments to make a return on it. The government takes taxpayer dollars, which we earn through hard work where we actually do run a business to make profit, and then through our collective decision-making processes that we all vote on every few years, voting in our representatives, our senators, and the president, those people, our elected representatives, are supposed to figure out how to take our tax dollars and pretty much blow it to the wind in the way that makes us the happiest and would be the most beneficial for public benefit and welfare. And that doesn't always mean that the decision has to be based inside of the United States of America and has to be directly investing inside the United States. You have to go and sometimes invest that money overseas. For example, when we built the Panama Canal, that was actually at the time inside of a U.S. territory. There could be a very large argument that that's a U.S. territory, who cares, let's not build a canal, but we put a load of money into it because it was going to create a massive benefit in trade and decreasing the cost of transport for goods traveling in between the East Coast and the West Coast of the U.S. When we conduct our military spending, which is nearly $1 trillion a year at this point, we are conducting that military spending to protect all of our trading partners around the world that we buy goods from, that we cherish very dearly in this country, and also so that way in the hope that they'll buy some of our goods as well and make us money both ways around. There is a massive amount of reasons why the U.S. government, pretty much as far as people are concerned, blows money to the wind is because in the end it comes around in a very indirect way that it actually produces some sort of an inherent benefit or some sort of a general act of good for the United States of America and the public welfare. That's really how it actually works. So it's a little bit ridiculous to act like when we put money in something, we're supposed to have a return on the investment up front, because it just never works that way. It doesn't work that way in anything. Like, for example...
But also, Enforcer, on the other hand, I do see some people saying, well, why wouldn't we want to get paid back? Here's my thing. I am in favor. Let's say, for example, it looks like the Ukraine war might go on for some time longer. At least in my opinion, it looks like it will. Maybe another year or two, the war might be going on. So this is turning into a multi-year long war. There's nothing wrong with the United States deciding to switch to a loan format. If they want to say to Ukraine, okay, we'll keep funding you, but we do need to sign some fair mineral deal, which states whatever we give you in aid, we get in return the same amount of minerals basically in return to basically repay us back for what we're giving you to support your country. That would honestly be fair, in my opinion. There wouldn't be anything wrong with that, because the U.S. shouldn't have to foot the entire bill, because once again, we are helping Ukraine, but we're also helping ourselves by protecting the NATO alliance. So there's a dual-edged sword there. Nothing wrong with getting paid back. It's just we can't ask them to pay back double what we gave them. That would be insane.
But another thing, I see some people saying, well, the government has to eventually make a return on investment. No, they don't. The government isn't designed to do that. The amount, the revenue that the government makes, if no one knows, is made through this amazing organization that many people consider to be the ire of the United States, which is called the Internal Revenue Service. And what their job is to go around and tell people that you owe the government a share of the money that you made this year, and if you don't pay it, we're going to give you a penalty, or we're going to put you in prison if you refuse to pay it outright. So you need to pay your share to the government. And that's how the government makes revenue. The government rarely ever is supposed to go into a money-making venture, because then there's a little bit of an issue with that, is that the government is now making its own power, in a sense, economically, which it's not supposed to do, because if the government was supposed to do that, if it was supposed to always get a return on investment on everything that it does, tell me what government department is actually return on investment at this point. The National Park Service would be a good example. The Department of Defense. I mean, that's a money pit. I mean, like, every time we buy a tank, it's not like you can repurpose that tank for agriculture in the future when you're done with it. It's just unusable at that point. It's wasted material. And not only that, it's a massive expense to just run the thing. It's a huge waste of money. Look at other departments inside of the government. Look at any of them, for that matter. The Drug Enforcement Agency spends tons and tons of money to stop illegal narcotics from entering the country. But they don't resell the narcotics when they get them, so they're making a total loss. I mean, they just stop something from entering the country, no money made. Like, when you look at every single government department, there is no return on investment at all. And one thing that I was looking at today, which is something that a lot of people would know about, and I have to include it because many of you all know that I'm a bit of a railroad person, is the railway post office. And this was something that was massive.
How to come back to railroads? How did it come back to it?
Yeah, I'm going to explain it, because this was a crazy amount of money that the government put into this. Transporting mail is something that has been the government's priority up until the advent of email, which largely got rid of the government's importance in actually mailing information or letters or correspondences from person to person. But throughout most of the nation's history, the post office was one of the most important assets or facets of society the government ran. And the government could cut costs down on this as much as they wanted to, and they could have made mail as slow as possible to transport and going with the cheapest options, just because of the fact that it would be more efficient for the government and it would be cutting down on the lack of expenditure that they're making. But the government put an insane amount of money into the railroads way back when they first were created to create railway post offices, which is this little rail car right here. And what it would do is that they would have these railway post offices attached to every single passenger train on the country, and they would travel around and grab bags with this little grab arm right here full of mail from each town, sort it while the train is on the move, and then throw out the sack for each town as they were coming along with all the letters that were supposed to be going to that town. These little railway post office cars costed the government an insane amount of money. They were taking huge losses on this every year by throwing money at the post office to run these things. The training required for the mail attendants inside of those rail cars was insane. I mean, it was the most rigorous training that the post office ever put into anyone ever. These rail cars had to be leased and pretty much paid for every single day they existed. by the Postal Service of the United States. And all of it was simply for the fact that the letters would arrive practically overnight in most instances throughout most of the United States because of these railway post office cars. The government made no return on investment on this at all directly. It was just a complete waste of government money if you wanted to look at it like that. But one thing that they were able to make sure is that it increased the tax base because correspondences in between businesses were not arriving over the course of 5 days or a week any longer. They were arriving overnight, making the actions of commerce far quicker to conduct and overall increasing the economic activity due to the fact that people are able to get business done a lot faster than they were in the past. This was a huge deal, a massive deal for many people, and the government never made a dime from this. They lost a load of money doing this, and eventually this would be replaced by 18-wheelers or airlines around the 50s or the 60s. But nevertheless, once again, another great argument when you look at it, that the U.S. government really never is supposed to make a return on investment from anything directly. Like, for example, we never made a return on investment directly from our support in the Lend-Lease to any country in World War II ever. Like, the British just got done repaying their the money that we gave them in the Lend-Lease about 2 years ago. We didn't make the return on investment just 3 years after the end of World War II or right at the end of World War II. It took us literally 70 or so years to finally get repaid everything, including interest on the Lend-Lease that we gave to the UK. But you know what we got out of World War II? I'll show you. We got that. That's what we got. That's what we've gotten out of all of that wasted money, if people want to call it that the United States has thrown at everything for 70 years. We have gotten the largest economy in the globe to show for it. And I would have to say that the prosperity of Americans, people don't realize it, is something to really show for it in itself. The fact that groceries don't make up the majority of people's budgets yet, that might be changing soon, but at least don't take up the majority of people's personal budgets monthly at this point, is word in itself that the U.S. economy is wildly successful. The fact that the United States is the only country in the world where 80% of people in the nation own a personal automobile really speaks a lot to the kind of personal wealth that people have inside of this country that in other countries is not seen, one, in Europe because they have great public transportation, but in two, in other countries, simply because people could not afford an automobile. There are loads of things that the United States has gotten indirectly as a return on investment because of the massive amounts of wasted money, if we want to put it that way, that the government has spent. So in my opinion, I would have to say that supporting Ukraine is an incredibly good thing. And really, the Ukrainians don't owe the United States anything back because the United States didn't initially put it out that way. It was just money given to them to be given to them, and you can't retroactively go back and tell them, give us the money now, after we said that it was going to pretty much be given to them free of charge. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and with that, it's time for us to move on into another poll that we've seen. We're going to have to make this a little bit short because we got to get to a lot more news.
Oh, no, save this one. Save this one.
Okay, so then that means we got to get on to some live chat questions and then get on into the news. So what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so this one is going to go to Peace with War, who says, does it look like European countries are willing and able to provide peacekeeping forces to Ukraine?
It looks like they are willing. I'm not really sure if they'd be able because the Russians might just deny that in the current situation. And if we made any sort of an agreement to largely send in peacekeepers, that would just be denied by the Russians and the war would continue, or the Europeans would just have to back off. So I hope that addresses that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And also, Enforcer, let's save the rest for the final segment. I don't have a ton of questions tonight. And also, we're getting super late with the news. I'm sure people want to hear it. So we can save the rest for the last segment if you want.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, with that, I suppose we're moving on into the rest of the news. Really throwing me off kilter there. But moving on from that and into Zhytomyr, we did get to see a Ukrainian Mi-8 blowing away a Shahed 136 over the city of Zhytomyr. And we see the Ukrainian Mi-8 greasing the thing, and it's going down. Oh! And you just cut out. And that's the end of that clip, but still very interesting to see. Moving on from that, also, by the way, Matthew, is the heater on in the house for once?
The heater is on. Why?
It is. Now it's blazing hot back here. Usually it's freezing cold, folks. Now it's blazing hot back here. I've been sweating for like 30 minutes back here. My hair is actually like soaking wet at this point from how hot it is.
Have you been checked for the cold?
No. Hopefully I don't have one because I was kind of starting to sniffle a little bit there earlier on. But
Hey,
moving
you
on.
sound like you're getting a little sick or something.
Well, potato, potato. But beyond that, moving on to our next clip. Hopefully, you can turn down the air though, so that way it's not too hot back here because it is roaring hot back here. We did get the air defense report, and we got to hear that overnight the Russians have launched the largest drone attack that has ever been seen in the history of the Ukraine war. The Russian Federation launched 267 Shahed drones into Ukraine. It was a record number, and out of that, 138 drones were directly shot down by ground air defense fire. An additional 119 drones were also taken down by electronic warfare measures, meaning, in total, out of the 267 drones that the Russian Federation launched into Ukraine last night, only 10 of them made it through. That is an insane air defense report right there. Out of all of those incoming air targets, and let's do the math right there on the interception rate. Out of all of those incoming air targets, 257 of them were shot down, and that means that out of the total number, around 96%, 96.3% as a matter of fact, of all Russian drones fired into Ukraine overnight were intercepted by Ukrainian air defense. An unbelievable kind of an interception rate. That, in fact, is so good, it's almost up to the level of a Patriots interception rate, which is around 99%. The Ukrainians are only about 1% to 2% short. So an amazing report last night for the air defense. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see a Mavic getting hit by Ukrainian laser, and they were really cooking it. But it appears that we are getting very close in the modern day to finally seeing directed energy weapons being used in an air defense aspect against smaller drones like these.
Man, look at him grinding on that drone.
Man, that sounded wrong. Look at him.
It is. I mean, look at it. It's like basically grinding it.
Man, it's kind of cooking it. And it looks like it's about to go down. The Mavic, it attempts to resist, but sadly...
It's honestly impressive that it can track it like that. Like, obviously, it's impressive it can smash it with a laser, but that's impressive tracking.
Dude, they said, fry him, cook him. It's like, dang, man. It's like, that's actually crazy. But moving on from that and into the Kursk Oblast, we did get to see that the Russians are continuing to try and push through the Ukrainian lines, but really to no success. We were able to see, however, that one Russian tank was almost immortal, which was this turtle tank right here. When you see it driving on through the front lines, and it hits one anti-tank mine and survives, bled. It hits a second one and survives, bled. It's about to hit a third one, and it also survives. This is the first Russian tank I've ever seen that actually has a decent survivability rate, bled. It hits a fourth one, and it, believe it or not, survives, bled. And we see the turtle tank has now survived a fifth anti-tank mine and a sixth one right there, bled. And finally, it continues to roll on. The Ukrainians try to hit it with an FPV, and at last, Russian stupidity dooms the turtle tank as it falls into a crater and is not able to escape. So, out of everything that could have destroyed this tank on the battlefield, the Russians actually didn't get the tank directly knocked out. They ended up running it into a crater, and it got stuck. And so that's how they lost the tank. It wasn't through any explosives or anything like that. It literally falls into a crater, and the tank is lost as a result. So moving on from that, and on from that little clip and into our next one, we also get to see the 67th Mechanized Brigade knocking out another Russian tank in the area. Look at this. It appears to be a Nanobliet. None of your business. Oh!
Oh, bliad.
And we can see them now hitting a bridge layer. Oh!
Laying down bridges.
Man, call it a diplomat the way it's laying out bridges, but call the Ukrainians a non-diplomatic dictatorship the way they burn the bridge layer blade. Though we can see that they're continuing to target more Russian forces.
Oh, look at everything. Oh, what the hell? It hit something.
Oh, blade. Look at that. Holy moly. Very nice hits by 67th Mechanized. Moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see the Russians getting hit hard by the FPV drones. Here we can see...
that's just so copyrighted, that right there. I remember that one from back in the day. That was like meme content galore, that music right there.
That was before YouTube started to heavily exercise the Content ID system.
I am the one. I am the one.
I don't even know the whole song, but I know that part. Like, I am the one, and then it moved on to something else. I think I might actually be getting a little cold here.
I'm for some reason I'm out here like with like air like just messing with me right now. It's causing me like to have a hard time. Like when I go to start talking, I feel like I'm gasping for air or something like that because I'm like having like air bubbles or something going on. I'm not sure how to explain it, but I'm like, what's going on tonight? But I'm generally like feeling fine except for that. But you know, I think you might be getting sick.
I think I might be getting sick. Sick of the
Common
shit.
cold, I think. Oh,
What?
damn.
What? Come on, hit me with it.
Sick of the shit.
Man, I was being real right there. I hope y'all like that. I had to make a joke somehow. But we can see them here hitting another drone. Matthew just left me hanging there. I thought he was going to continue.
I didn't know where to go with that.
Man, he just said sick of the shit. And then went quiet. I was like, okay. I was like, all right, man.
I thought you were down with the sickness, but I mean, okay.
Man, I got to tell y'all something. I was walking down the street today, and I saw this bird, and it said, "Psst, hey, you want to be in on the next big thing?" And I said,
Bats, not birds, man.
"Well, I thought there was a bird flu going around."
Oh yeah, but you're talking about the other thing that we can't mention. That's a bat.
I had this delicious soup today.
Oh no, man! I went to the dry market today. I'm telling you.
Actually, no, it was the wet market.
I know. I was trying to mix it up, not to make it obvious. I know.
Oh man, I'm telling you, I get no respect around here. Oh man, I went to a market today. They gave me a soup. It was made out of a bat. Oh man, I'm telling you.
But moving on from that, we unfortunately got to see Ukrainian Bradley getting hit in the middle of Suja today by an FPV drone.
Also, I'm just saying, you know, no disrespect to other people's cultures and stuff. Like, feel free to do whatever you want with your culture. I would never eat food out of a wet market. I mean, that just sounds nasty. You have meat in a wet market. That doesn't sound right.
I get to tell you, man, it's like, I'll just be honest with you. If it's not like a livestock animal, like if it's a like we were watching Matthew had some video on the TV today, and they were eating like a monkey, like it was a rhesus monkey or something like that. I was like, I'm just not a fan of eating something that is like monkey or ape like. I just don't find, I'm not like a fan of eating something like that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, it just seems wrong. Like, I don't know how to explain that beyond that.
I just like to keep it pretty mainstream when it comes to meats. Like, I'm not eating, you know, giblets and, you know, bits and mince and all this stuff. It's like, I'm you know, not every part of the animal has to be eaten. You know, so there's some countries out there that like to eat every single part of the animal, including, you know, private bits. I'm like, you know, like, you know, we can probably do without that.
Dude, you've never heard of a mountain oyster? This fella's never heard of a mountain oyster. You know what a mountain oyster is?
No, if it's disgusting though, please don't show it because the air bubbles are gonna probably push me over the edge here.
Boiled bull testicles. Not kidding. Like, that's actually a thing.
I've actually seen the guy on the YouTube channel eating that yesterday. I was like, that is so nasty. I'm like, why would you do that? But anyway.
Yeah. Like, I'm like, nah, I'm not gonna do that, man. I'm sorry. Like, it's like, that's like a Liver King kind of a thing. But then he eats them raw. Like, he takes it to the next level. But anyways, moving on from that and into the location unknowns, we did get to see the Ukrainians hitting them good. Check it out. We got to see this fellow over here, IFG, and we can see them hitting a truck full of them. And they were getting them good. Moving on from that and into our next clip, and holy moly, the donations coming in are insane.
Dang.
We've actually made up to $3.5 thousand raised while I almost like burped on air right there. I was about to turn into the governor of Alabama. But anyways, moving on into our next clip, we also got to see them taking out more Russian infantry positions. There they are. They're right there in that little village house. Oh, that whole house came down. Call that renovations.
Call that construction because they're bringing it down like destruction. That made no sense, but roll with it.
Hit them with a drone strike. And they did.
Hit them with a circular target. Yeah, that's right.
The American people, I have to tell you
that we're going to make him pay. Or something like
Osama bin Housing.
Osama bin Laden.
Yeah, that's an old one there.
Ladies and gentlemen, we greased him. But moving on from that,
Extra grease.
call him Osama bin Greason. The way we greased him up, or something like the videos.
Если мало отпускаешь колодки, типа, понял? Нагреваешь. Когда не на чем есть.
Also, by the way, I forgot to give any context to this clip. This is apparently the new assault vehicle that the Russians are using. It's literally hoverboards. They're loading them into the back of a truck to bring them to the front lines for assaults. No kidding. Like, that's actually what they're doing.
Нагреваешь. Когда не на чем ездить.
And there's someone behind the camera that almost sounds like the Russian version of Miss Doubtfire. Oh, look, we're taking the hoverboards.
Когда не на чем ездить.
And then some guy just got hit in the balls with one. Speaking of noise, JC went, oh, like right there at the end.
Man, somebody got castrated.
Dude, some Russian over there just said, hey, you know, you want the mountain noise? Sure. And then that guy said, sure. And then that guy pulled out a knife and got him. He went, oh, like, oh, man. Moving on from that clip and on into our last location unknowns, we also got to see the casualty report. And holy moly!
Oh, 3 Bobcat skid steers. I can't believe it. We've got more than 2. And let's see, Miss Deesa even noted it. Special equipment rises to +3 after a month of 0 to 2 range. I'm glad to see it. They've hit an extra one for me. I appreciate that, Ukraine. Thank you. But Enforcer, tell us more.
My fellow Americans, it's been a pretty good day for Ukraine. It actually has been. And let's get into the record keeping from Ms. Deesa, keeper of the records. Special equipment rises to +3 after a month of 0 to 2 range, which is amazing news. Things are looking up for Ukraine. All else is below the 7-day averages. We'll just skip over that. Like the highest loss item is 117 drones, which ranks the 20th highest daily loss, and the troop loss is on track to dip to November monthly levels. Still incredibly high for most of the war, but not the highest it's been, if you know what I mean, if you're catching the drift, if you're catching the rift. But nevertheless, 1,180 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed in the past 24 hours, along with 12 APCs, 91 supply trucks, 7 main battle tanks, 54 artillery pieces, 117 drones, 1 MLS, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, and 3 Bobcat skid steers. Overall, it was a pretty good day, and it's time for us to get on into the front lines and take a little gander around, as we were able to see up in the northern area near Kupiansk that the Russians were getting hit pretty bad by the 3rd Brigade, and we were able to see that right up here by the 3rd Tank Brigade. Check it out while I sit there and stutter through that last part, but we can see the drone hitting right there, and they put in a little special effect that wasn't from the actual video, but we can now see the drone coming in again and doing its little hit. Bam! Oh my lord, and there goes the whole bunker. Assembly
Just
required.
a little love tap.
Man, if that is a love tap, then that must, like, we're not going to even add on to that show. Because like the punchline of that is not good. But we can see here that they are hitting another Russian vehicle. And they're really zooming
on something, but I can't really tell what they're looking at.
Me either. It's like a mass. Like, it's like, I don't even know. My fellow Americans, it appears to be a gelatinous mass.
Oh, there was a Russian Sailor Man shirt, like Popeye the Sailor. He had it hanging outside to dry.
Wow!
Wow, they got my shirt.
They got my shirt. I call them clothesline. Yeah, wow!
Holy moly! Look at that. Janara Allen is throwing a 300. You see that? Look at that. We're almost
Look
on
at
the
that.
4,000 raise.
Look at that! Holy moly! And we can see a little Ukrainian drone down there. It's about to make the dip. And there it goes. Any second now. Oh, it's lining her up. And it's going on in. And there it goes. It's gone.
Hatsiri. Oh, there's a mountain oysters.
Look, it's mountain oysters. That's the symbol that they made for that guy in the last clip that went, oh, that's where it happened. It happened right there. They're like, we have to make a monument to this special occasion, Blade.
Oh man, cut into the hot dog man. He's the glizzy gobbler.
Dude, Hot Dog Man right now, he's like, oh, my lord, my people, they need me. Like, and he's running there right now.
Oh, no.
It's like the Batman symbol for him. But anyways, moving on from that and down to Swatobe, we also get to see them hitting more Russians up in the Luhansk area. Check out this little BMP right here that's about to get it. Oh, cooking up that fuel. I guess you could say it was a little gassy. And it looks like the Russians are about to get gassed. Oh, man, by these drones, they're giving them the throttle. Putting it in the second gear.
I guess you could say the Russians' connection got throttled.
Man, we're trying to be like motorheads, as they call them in Britain. Petrol heads.
Petrol heads. Yes, they love petrol.
Oh, man. Oh, man, I'm telling you. But moving on from that and into our next clip, a little bit further on down the lines, we also got to see a little Czech Dita firing. Look at that. Czech Dita. Wow. What an amazing vehicle. I like them. I just think they're neat. But you know something else that I think is neat? The Czech Republic. I have like this thing. I want to go to the Czech Republic and take a gander at it because it's just such an interesting country. It really is. And a lot of these smaller towns that are inside the Czech Republic, like for example, this one up here. I don't even know what's in it. But what's in it? Why, old, kind of like 17th century looking buildings. It just looks so neat. And I really do want to go and see places like this someday. It's just that we're so busy, and it costs so much to fly to Europe right now, that it would be really hard to go over there at this very moment. But you know what they say, no time is like the present, and the prices are only going to be getting more expensive. So hopefully one day we will be able to go over here and see such a thing. But you know, one thing that really makes me interested in the Czech Republic, probably for many, is the game Kingdom Come Deliverance, because the Czech Republic was cool to me beforehand, really because of those neat bridges in Prague, like this one. I just find the
I like that bridge, man. I like the architecture a lot.
Yeah, I like the Czech style roofs, like these that are on castles and bridges and such things. I just think they are some of the coolest looking, and I've always wanted to go to Prague for that. But Kingdom Come Deliverance made me interested in the rest of the country because I was like, oh, what a cool game. I was like, it really represents the Czechs well. And it really is interesting because it does teach you a lot about Czech culture, a little bit. Like, not a lot, but it's somewhat. And it's always like, wow, I'd like to go there and just see this place, you know, because it's neat. And also, a lot of people are talking about Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. I love Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, even better than the first one. Like, it's way better than the first one, in my opinion, and the first one was already on up there as one of my favorite games back in the day when it came out, so I've been having a blast with it too. I got it after it was released by, like, a good week or two, but I've been playing it for now, and oh my goodness, it is so good. It is insanely good. I've been trying to get Matthew to get it and play it, but I don't know if he's interested in it too much. But anyways...
I'm not really a video gamer. I work 24/7. I'm like a workaholic or something.
Don't kid yourself. I come down and see you playing GTA from time to time. You could be playing Kingdom Come Deliverance too.
Like, can I have an hour? I mean, just an hour?
No, you're on company time. Like, I'm just kidding. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on to this next clip where we got to see the view of a tank commander in Seversk. And they giving them that grease. A little foggy inside the turret. A little smoky, honestly. And that's the end of that clip. And also, I got to give a massive shout out to a massive bit of support that just came through on PayPal. But the reason why I'm announcing this is for Matthew to know, and also for us to get some clarification on this, because we just received $300 on PayPal.
Holy moly.
And I am not sure if that's supposed to be directed towards the channel as pretty much a super chat, or if that's supposed to be for tonight's Sunday night fundraiser.
What's the first letter of the first name?
S.
That's intended for the fundraiser. Also, by the way, a note real quick, because I think she might have missed it. We sadly cannot accept donations on PayPal for the fundraiser because it messes up our accounting really badly. We found that out this year. It was a whole thing to get the accounting straightened out. So sadly, we can't accept them on PayPal. Otherwise, it like sends our accounting into haywire mode. So Huge shout out, by the way. I'm not sure if she wants us to say her name on the air for donating like that, but we will return back to it if she does. But that's massive support. But sadly, we can't do that on a regular basis, though, because of that reason.
And so we'll be waiting for some clarification on that. So let me know, Matthew, what the answer is to that, because if
It's for the fundraiser.
okay, so let me really quickly take a moment to put that in on the fundraiser on the side. It's just that we did find out, for accounting purposes this year, this throws a lot of things into chaos. So we really can, we're going to do it right now because we haven't told anyone about that, but we really cannot do that into the future from here, because if we do, there's a whole bunch of accounting issues with that. But still, a massive thanks to you for throwing that in, to put that towards the fundraiser, because folks like you help out Ukraine massively through your support to the fundraisers, and we just hit $4,000 raised. Holy moly! But still,
Holy moly.
with that, we are going to be moving on into our next clip further down the line towards Toretsk, where we get to see the Phoenix going to work. And, let's see here. And here we go. I mean, you see them here getting ready to target those Russians and take them on out. Oh!
Whoa, holy moly, Jack. Oh.
We now see them coming on down hot and heavy. Holy moly, that's like the quickest descent I've ever seen.
Man, they're going down harder than the Titanic. Whoa.
Whoa, Jack, they're going down. They're going down. Whoa, Jack, whoa.
Whoa, Jack!
Oh!
Did you see they went down to the depths of the Mariana Trench, the hills of the Himalayas, Xi Jinping, snow on the table. Anyway,
Look, they went hard. They really got him. They hit him good. Look, Jack. You don't think that was deep? The Mariana Trench, it's very deep, real deep. I'm telling you, Jack, it's very deep. Look, you gotta go big or go home, Jack. What's going on around here?
they're dropping bombs. You know, those Hawaiian rolls are real good. Oh, I like those with butter. Anyways, buttered sauce. I'm sorry. Anyway.
Let's talk about buttered sausage. Why is it here? What's it doing? Get it out of my face. So, but anyways, moving on from that clip from the Phoenix unit and moving on into Pokrovsk, we also got to see them hitting the Russians in Selidove. And look at this. It was a sight to behold. Y'all will know this voice.
Там, де звичайно
It's Matt!
по визначенню курить з керованістю з причин відстані та купи бетонних перешкод працює народне оптоволокно збірки інженерів птахів Мадяра. Працює на глибині 20 кілометрів у суцільному бетонному куполі. І знаєте що? Знаходить ось таке.
Танки, свім. Да, танчик.
Да,
Це
танчик. Dang.
Ой, скільки тут всього, блядь. Одно БМП. Два БМП. Якийсь ахмал, блядь. Ще двоє цю хуйню їбам. Давай, може вона загориться, все остальне, блядь. Давай? Давай. В кабіну? Ні, в кабіну сюди.
Oh, and they got it. Holy moly. Dude, they got an orc in there. Yeah, dude, there's some
It's
orc
not like
in
somebody
the...
screaming for their life.
Sound like they were like getting shivved inside of their command bunker for a second. Let's listen to it again.
That guy's screaming out for help, man. It doesn't sound like a battle cry.
Oh my lord. Well, they got it. I mean, like, I guess they're happy for a reason. But man, I'm not gonna lie, dude. That sounded legitimately, like an orc from the Lord of the Rings or something like that, yelling. It's like, it's like, dang, dude. It's like, oh my god.
Єбать, плачу, сусідів відігнали, бачиш? Відігнали. А ну-ка, тут ж мочину прилізеш?
А тепер увага! Пілоти Кліматим б'ють дуплетом у дві БМП одночасово з двох різних сторін того схорону. Ахуєнчик результат! залетіли оптоволокном у стилі розвідка боєм, знайшли відразу 4 броні, одну запалили, хробаки другу ББМ-ку встигли вигнати, тому 3-ю і 4-ту БМП вирішили бити одночасово і тим, що було під руками, звичайними неоптоволоконними F-10. Трійнічок у моменті та удар дуплетом. Красунчики, честь козаки.
And that's the end of the clip right there, but still, very nice to see. And moving on from that and out of that clip, we are now going to be moving on into the next clip where we also got to see, within the area of Pokrovsk, some Russians getting messed up rightly by the 109th Territorial Defense Forces Brigade.
Look, gents, send in a drone and mess them up, you hear me?
Also, Matthew, by the way, we just received another 300-pound PayPal, and I'm wondering, is that for the channel or is that for the fundraiser?
Is it from the same person?
Yes.
Interesting. Let me do some inquiring and make sure.
And we will get an answer on that, but in the meantime, we can see the Murmasa slamming Russian forces. And we see them continuing to hit him time and time again. Very impressive right there.
Someone said, "Why the long face?" Who are you talking to, Lavrov? Why is his face long? It's genetic. He's from a long line of thoroughbreds.
Some of the best in Catherine's the Great's court, and if you know what I mean, you know what I mean. But
Rumor has it that he goes by on Sunday called Seattle Slew.
Hey, man, I'm telling you, oh man, that might be true. But moving on from that, we also get to see some Russians surrendering in this direction still as the Ukrainian counterattack is going on strongly.
Also, a British person in the chat has gotten angry that I'm mocking the accent. I'm not even mocking it. I'm just simply doing an impersonation. That's all. What do you think I am, a Peaky Blinder?
Let's see here. Who said that, Matthew? Who said that?
Who said this hypocrisy? Let's see. It's Martin Jinx.
Martin
Jinkies.
Jinkies. Let's see here. I'm wondering, let's see, Martin. Oh, I'm in the top chat. Let me go to the live chat. Yeah, let me go to the live chat. Where in the world's this Jinkies here? Let's see here.
What are you, blind man? What are you, Venetian? You got blinded?
What the hell's that got to do with being a Venetian, yeah? Like, it's like, what the hell's
they make blinds, Venetian blinds? You getting blinded? Or what are you, a peaky?
Oh, you know, I actually know why that's called a Venetian blind, man. Do you want to hear the story? You want to hear the little story there? Why they call Venetian blinds? You want to hear it?
I mean, I thought they were blind, but go ahead.
So in Venice, you see, they do this thing, man, where you go up to a cart, you know, in the market here in Venice, you know, down here, around here where the market was, you know what I mean? You go there and you try and get yourself some, you know, little goods. But by the time you came out of the market, you would be out of money. They would have pickpocketed you while you were walking through the market, and that's why they call it a Venetian blind, because you're being robbed in Venice blind. I'm just kidding, by the way. That's not even the story at all. I just came up with that literally on the spot. But moving on from that, because we're going to completely gloss over the fact that I made up that whole story just to try and make a Venetian blind joke, we also get to see this Russian assault getting repelled in Velika Novosilka. And also, a big shout out to Susan L for throwing in a 300-pound super chat for the large part into our PayPal, and a massive thanks for you for enjoying the channel and wanting to help it to keep on running. And it's good to know that you're still around, and thank you for saying that we do great work, chaps, because that was the comment attached to the super chat for the large part that came in through PayPal. And we're massively appreciative and thankful for your support, and thank you so much for enjoying the channel and helping it to keep on running. I was getting scared there that was another supposed to be another donation, because like, oh my god, I'm gonna get mauled in the taxes for these.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I'm not going too deep into the explanation here, as we don't want to say everything, because obviously that's personal business. But the thing is, when they come in on PayPal like that and their donation is for the fundraiser, because it was received by our PayPal account, we owe income tax on it. We must report the income tax, and we will report it. So that's the catch with it, is we have to do that. But with them at the same time, we have to put the 300 back into the fundraiser. So it's a loss on our end, because we have to pay one of the highest income tax rates in the country on that income. So that's the reason why. Just to clarify it.
Yeah. So,
Also, though, I see Monster Lab said if the Enforcer brothers were corrupt like the hot dog man says, they wouldn't announce they're getting PayPal donations tonight. And isn't that true? I mean, honestly, every time we get a PayPal donation, we call it off literally on the air the moment it comes through, every single time, because we're trying to be transparent about it. So, just disproving the hot dog man's facetious lies, I must say.
yeah, and also the other thing that was scaring me about that is that, like, for example, with that amount of support coming in, like on the fundraiser, we're having to put in $300 into the fundraiser, but then also I'm having to pay about, at least I would believe, about $100 in taxes on that. So it's actually costing me a significant amount of money whenever that happens. That's why when the second one came in, I was sweating. I was like, we need a clarification on that. I was like, I'm about to get mauled tonight. Because I already, like, tonight, as of tonight, like, we work for free on Sunday nights. We don't make a cent doing this on Sundays. So I'm already putting in $100 of my own, and then I'm having to absorb another 100 or so in taxes, and I'm like, oh my lord. I'm like, I'm losing my shirt here. Like,
But also, by the way, like, big thanks to you, Susan L, for the also donating to the fundraiser and also donating to the channel, because you didn't know that. Like, it's obviously not your fault. So we're not trying to make it sound like it's your fault or anything. We're just explaining to the other folks that are thinking about doing that why it wouldn't be good to do that. So, but not trying to like shame you or guilt you or anything for doing that. Seriously, big thanks for the support.
yeah, massive thanks for the support, Susan L. I don't want you to think that we're at all griping about it or anything. It's just that you were the first person to do it ever since, since we really started to, put together the numbers and find that out. And so, like, now it's like we really, like, that was the first time it's been done since we've largely started to discover how much that costs us in taxes, because we paid the taxes like we do every year. It's just that it does cost us an exorbitant amount, and doing the accounting, we were finding that out this year, and we were like, oh my god, we really have to not do that from this point forward. So you're the first to do it, so there's no issue with that. But from here forward, we really can't do that because of how that works. But beyond that, we can see here that the Russians are still trying to make it into Velika Novosok. It's just that they're not really succeeding.
Also, by the way, someone mentioned the hot dog man again. Somebody actually called the hot dog man out on Twitter about the lawsuit that got filed against him for defamation a while back. And they literally called him out, talking about, what was this stuff about you, like, defaming somebody and stuff? And he just sort of, like, rolled over it and pretend like he didn't see it. But, yeah, that fella, he's a doozy. I think he decided to move on, though. His channel's, like, so dead now because it literally gets no views anymore. That I think he's just decided to quit calling people out. Although on Twitter, he's still going off like a berserk maniac. But on YouTube, he seems to have toned it down a bit. He might have maybe learned a lesson, but I wouldn't put any stock in that. And
he was such a big Ukrainian patriot until he completely burned his britches with everyone in the community, and then he moved right back into domestic politics and was starting to try and chill off of that for some cash, for some coin, like what like the medieval people would say. He's moved on to another graft for a coin. It's like, man, he's hard at work over there. Really into the domestic politics thing now, and he's going, oh man, I need a desk and a chair and a trip to DC. It's a pitiful thing. He ought to give up and go back to working at a gas station or something. He's more suited for that kind of work.
Also, someone said Hot Dog Man's journey is the Johnny Somali of the news category.
Yeah, I mean, it really is.
Honestly, like, really, that's his big shtick. It's not saying the news, because he's honestly terrible at that. The reason why he gets views at any point, granted, the views are extremely small, is because usually he stirs up controversy with people. And I think that might be why his channel has fallen off recently, is because he sort of like ended the controversy grift, and he's trying to go straight into news, which is not his forte. He's not a journalist or a news person whatsoever. So that's why he's fallen off.
And he's terrible. I mean, like Matthew watched like a small segment of his Ukraine war coverage lately. He gives no analysis or depth to anything. He's just like, whoa, look at that. Wow. Moving on. It's like, well, that's not anything. Like, no analysis at all. Substanceless. Honestly, I'm kind of missing the hit pieces too. It made me feel kind of bigger than we were. Like, to just have a professional hater.
We would like another hit piece.
Another hit piece. But anyways, moving on, we also got to see the Russians getting cooked by the 128th Territorial Defense Forces as well near Velika Novosok today. And off grid with Scott said, yeah, we call him the hot dog man instead of his name because we don't want to promote him. Exactly. And then one day he tried to go, oh man, I'm the hot dog man. And it's like, oh, blame. It's like, so then his own people started calling him the hot dog man. It's like, dude, that was like the worst move you could make. You literally owned up to it.
And then he explained why he called himself the hot dog man too, because he literally worked at a hot dog stand before he got into that, by the way. And also I think he worked at the hot dog stand while he was doing the news as well. Which is kind of fascinating.
It was an offer I couldn't refuse. Like it was a massive business deal or something. And it's like, dude, you worked at a hot dog stand at the fair for 2 days. It's like, that's not like I know fair pay. It's like, you know, no dissing on like food service folks because I've been there, but it's like, that isn't anything where it's like that's a big money move. It's like you got paid like $100 maybe over 2 days. It's like maybe. It's like, come on, man. It's like, be real. It's like that wasn't like some massive hustle or anything like that. It's like that was like a gig. Like and anyone can do that gig, you know? He's like, oh man, it's a big offer. It's like, come on, man. But anyways, moving on from that, we did get to see the some Ukrainian drones conducting some counter operations against Russian drones and knocking them out. You see him getting slammed here.
Someone said, please stop saying largely. What do you want me to say, bigly?
Trying to get out the idea that it's large, Jonathan. That's what I'm trying to get out here. That it's large. It's big. Largely. That's how I talk, Jonathan.
Pause.
What?
Man, that line of adjectives was going a little bit weird.
And it was going that way because I was about to drop down a Chris's mom joke. You stopped me in the middle of building up my momentum.
But man, it was taking a long time to get to it. I was like, oh man, I don't know if you know how this sounds.
No, I was knowing exactly how it was sounding. I was working up to the Chris's mom punchline, and then you went pause, and I was like, damn it. I was like, you killed it, man. I was like, you killed the momentum. Now I'm just left with saying it's large. So I was like, damn it. But anyways, here's a clip of some Russians being taken prisoner by some partisans.
Поздравляем от имени СРОК Русню с 23 февраля. Надеемся, этот праздник станет последним для вас. Слава Украине! Слава СРОК!
All right, we're going to be muting that and stopping that right there because I don't know what's coming up next, but it's fading to black and there's a drum line. So moving on from that, head into the Kherson Oblast. We got to see a Tulpan getting destroyed. And here's the clip. Have you ever wanted to see a Tulpan get destroyed? It's huge, humongously, hugely, largely, and in chargely. Beeps, Archie, and Ranger finally sleeping. Everyone is well, thanks. How are you and yours? When I was an LSA noob, I thought Hot Dog Man was Prigozhin, since he made millions of hot dog stands in Moscow. What are they saying? Slava Ukraini. They said it. Moderately macho combo-sized, computers can throw out a lot of heat when under load. Heck, I swear mine heats my room when I play Path of Exile. Value Radar, not anymore. The U.S. housing market is in crisis, like a SNL skit. And Heroem Slava. I'm literally just reading the live chat at this point. I'm just going through and just reading each message as they're coming in. But we can see the Ukrainians are getting them good. Oh my lord, and there goes the Tulpan. Right on time.
That Tulpan was hit so hard that it shook the camera vigorously.
Some would say that it shook it expeditiously. But moving on from that and pause, but moving on into the next clip, we got to see the Russians getting hit in Olasky. Take a gander at this one. El Kashur said, I don't know why, but sounds like a Dodge Ram commercial voice guy. Well, that's exactly what it's supposed to be. Guts, glory, Ram. Some people
with
say.
The emphasis on the guts.
Yes, I'd like the guts, the glory, and the ram, but with more guts, please. Thank you.
It's like, where does guts come into this equation? You got the guts, the glory, and the ram. It's like, I just have the glory and the ram and forego the guts.
You're just like the Dodge dealer. It's like, okay, well, you got your ram. Oh, that's great. And then you just hear the sound of like intestines falling out of a roof tile, and they're like, here's your guts. It's like
the Dodge dealer's like, no, you'll get the guts months later when you crash. Don't worry.
Man, when you fly out the windshield, like, the guts will be everywhere. There's the guts and the glory.
When you get done goosing that Hellcat, you have all the guts you ever want.
Man, but honestly, the biggest distributor of guts out there are Mustang drivers because they can run over a sidewalk crowd in seconds. Like, guts are everywhere at that point. But
Man, honestly, Hellcat drivers are actually good at whipping it around corners, really. Like, they're reckless drivers, but they're good at whipping it around corners. Mustang drivers aren't good at whipping around corners. They're not good at going in, like, around corners at all, actually, nor straight lines, for that matter. In fact, the straight line might be the deadliest thing for a Mustang driver, especially when there's a crowd. It's like a magnet.
man, I'm telling you, man, Mustangs sniff out crowds of people on sidewalks. Man, I'm not going to make that joke because a lot of people are going to come to the defense of the Pitbull dog. But I was going to make a joke about the Pitbull. And then people are going to be like, no, don't say that about the Pitbull. Like, look, man, like, the Pitbulls are dangerous, all right? I've never run into a nice Pitbull. Like, I think I've run into one, but that was like an outlier. I'm not going to lie. But anyways, moving on from that and up into Kyiv, we did get to see that there was no speech today. I literally just made a point to put that there was no speech. So that way we weren't wasting any time going to there and trying to check. There wasn't one. I double checked. And so sadly, no speech for today. But that moves us on directly into talking to all of y'all. And y'all know that we love to do that. We love to talk to y'all. And so, Matthew, what do we got? Do we have any top donors, speaking of which, before we get to that, huh?
Yes, we do. And our first one here goes to Hal Rose, who puts in a $333 donation. And I had to make a bit of an assumption on that because it actually didn't say if it was Hal Rose or not. It said anonymous. So I assumed that was Hal, but huge shout out to you, Hal, if it was. And also, huge shout out to Janara Allen, who put in a $300 donation. And also Susan L, UK, who put in a $300 as well, through PayPal, that is. And Michael McMahon put in a $69. Nice, as well, through the live chat, that is. But a huge shout out to all four of you for the massive support of the fundraiser. We're now up to over $4,000 raised, which is double the goal. We return the investment here like the United States wants to return the investment on Ukraine. Except this one's fair. But Enforcer, tell us more.
Hey, and I gotta say, big shout out to all of y'all for bringing that fundraiser total on up to where it is. It's up to $4,034. I almost mistook it right there for $4,043, but it's actually $4,034. It's the other way around. But nevertheless, I got to thank you all once again for massively supporting this fundraiser tonight and getting it up to where it is. It's absolutely incredible to know that so many of y'all have been here supporting this fundraiser and getting it up to the incredible heights that it's at right now. Truly an incredible thing. And a massive thanks and a pat on the back to each and every one of y'all, whether we're able to call out y'all's names or not. We know y'all who y'all are, and we see y'all. But nevertheless, man, I understand that we also got a little poll here. A little poll, Matthew. A little poll from the town of Lyublin. Which is right here, and I mispronounced the name of that town. But let's take a quick look at it while you talk about the poll. The little poll that we have here with us right now. So what do we got, Matthew?
Okay, so the poll that's running, it says Ukrainian intel says that North Korea provides 50% of Russia's ammo needs, a whopping amount. And why isn't North Korea being targeted by Western nations? 32% said that's because North Korea equals China. 31% said because North Korea has nukes. And 23% says we are targeting them through sanctions. And here's my assessment. This is going to be requiring a bit of a trust me bro on this one. I am pretty certain that North Korea is being used as the proxy for China providing weapons to Russia to fight against the West in Ukraine. Of course, we don't have direct evidence of that. But the fact that North Korea is providing 50% of Russia's total ammo needs, according to Ukraine, that does not sound like something that North Korea would actually be able to uphold on their own. Because, of course, that country is very poor. And where are they getting all the manufacturing abilities and supplies to be able to get this done? And it would seem to me they're getting help from some outside source. So I'm with the 31%. I'm sure the West probably has some inclination that's the case, but they haven't told us in the public just yet. But Enforcer, what say you?
I have a feeling that it probably is because North Korea has the defense pact with China and that they really don't want to try and force the Chinese hand into anything for the large part. I would largely have to agree with Matthew's assessments on it. I think his were well researched. And also, I hope you all enjoyed that little look at Lyublin at the exact same time. I know I'm mispronouncing that. It's my right. But anyways, with that, Matthew, what do we got? What do we got for questions? I understand we got plenty. A lot of them.
All right. And also, big shout out to Stephen Meyer, who put in a $50 donation to the fundraiser and helped to bring us up to almost $4,100 raised of our $2,000 goal. So tremendous to see once again. But we are now moving on. And also, it looks like a lot of people actually agree now that I've explained it that way. A lot of people were assuming that China probably is giving weaponry to Russia through North Korea. And honestly, that would be something along the lines of what China would probably want to do, actually, because obviously China wants to appear neutral in this whole situation. They want to appear like they're not truly involved in it. And what better way to do that than simply to give stuff to North Korea, like arm them, and then let them send it on to Russia? That would give them plausible deniability. And also, it would allow them to stay out of the fray, which is what China wants to do. So I would say that probably is the case. And we already know that China's sending dual use goods. So, and also they have a no limits partnership with Russia. So it's not too far fetched to think that they would fund Russia and arm them. And that would be something logically they would do. So that's probably the case in my opinion, at least. But anyways, jumping on to our first question here, this one's going to go to Dustin Mayo, who said, would Zelensky stepping down, if it meant peace for Ukraine, would that be a good move or just a chance for a pro-Russian to move in?
I think it would largely be a good move if Ukraine got into NATO doing that. But if he just did that and there was no guarantee to get into NATO, I think it would mean nothing. And I largely do think it would open up the way for anyone at that point to try and get in control of the Ukrainian government, which could be a bit of a concern for Western American interests. And so with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, at least in my opinion. And we are on to the next one.
And I almost forgot, but we need to get our Morse code decoders of the night as well. Tonight we had Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Kevin J, Paul Schultz, David Millsaps, Royal Fluffiness, Arabella Garbo, Joni Dog, and Norm Pritchett. They said tonight's LSA Morse code decipher says, how are they getting beaten up worse now than at any other point outside of 2022? LOL and LLT LSA.
And that's a ton of money. And y'all got that dead on the nail. That was the Morse code message of the night. I got to congratulate y'all greatly for getting that correct time and time again every single day for 1,096 days. Truly an incredible and absolutely amazing thing. I think it's absolutely one of the best, I would have to say. And I got to give you all huge congratulations for that once again. And also, man, the reason why I went, is because I literally didn't even remember that we completely skipped over the Morse code. I was like, oh man, we just almost completely ignored that. And nevertheless, y'all got it dead on the nail again tonight. So a big congratulations to y'all. But nevertheless, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. So our next one here is going to go to Shed Show Talk, who says, I'm British. I am mad at my government because we was assured Ukraine of the security. Can you tell me why the UK has not sent Sky Sabre into Ukraine? It sat in Poland.
The reason I really cannot explain that too well, to be entirely honest with you. I'm not entirely versed on British weapons acquisitions and orders being sent to Ukraine and why some of them would be held up. Unfortunately, I believe you would have to consult your experts inside the United Kingdom on the reasons as to why that's happening. So you may want to reference that question to the Ministry of Defense. Thanks. But that sounded almost like someone in the DoD, Matthew, at those press briefings. I'm sorry, I will have to refer you to the proper department. But unfortunately, I don't really know why that would be the case. But one thing I will say is that the United Kingdom is a fairly interesting place, especially because there's this place in Britain. There is this place. It's a amazing place that's had such an impact on the United States of America. And some people would be going, well, is that London? Is that Newcastle upon Tyne? No. It's a town in Wales, actually, called Newport. And some of you will be like, why in the world does that have any impact on the United States of America? And well, it's because of Newport cigarettes. But anyways, you can find those at every gas station. But beyond that, I'm just kidding around. Unfortunately, I cannot really tell you why that's being held up, because while I would know a pretty okay amount about U.S. weapons shipments and such things, British weapons shipments, beyond their announcements and then the end delivery, I don't really know a lot about what happens in between. So with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. And we are on to the next one.
All right. And our next one here is going to go to James Hughes. He says, I have heard that Ukraine now has some laser weapons. And do you know how many?
We really do not know. We do know that they have some laser weapons. We're thinking it's incredibly small in number, maybe less than 5. But we really don't even have a good idea to work off of to know if it's more than 5 or less than 5 or bigger than a bread box, unfortunately. But before we move on to the next one, I saw the Observer Man do the meme. Have you seen the meme? 500 cigarettes. You know, have you seen that?
No, I've never seen that meme.
What? You've never seen? Okay, sadly I cannot pull it up because we would get copyrighted into oblivion. It's part of a reality TV show, but it's like it's a ripoff of Star Trek that Seth MacFarlane made, and there's an alien in it, and they smoked a cigarette and they liked it. So then they went to the replicator and they said 500 cigarettes, and then it like replicated 500 cigarettes. Like, no joke. Like that's like the whole joke. But
I thought
I
you
saw,
about to say like served them up cancer or something like that and said, "Here's your instant cancer."
apparently it was explained in the show that that species couldn't get cancer from smoking a cigarette, but they still got addicted to smoking a cigarette. And so pretty much the whole lesson of like that whole episode, apparently from what I was able to gather, was that having an addiction that leads to withdrawals, even if even if it isn't harmful, is just bad. So don't do anything that would lead to that. It was something like that. But still,
it turns out that the species that was immune to cancer was the species of Marlboro Man.
bro, they're like, we come from a planet called Marlboro, where the tobacco grows tall. Like, it's like, we ride on these animals called camels from Newport to Newport. Like, it's trading in our shit or whatever, jewel pots. I don't know. But anyways, I didn't know how to end the joke. I just had to do something there. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Chris Russo, who says, any chance that Ukraine will take back as much of southern Ukraine before the peace deal?
I think it's a little unlikely, because while the Ukrainians are pushing the Russians back, it's not any kind of a massive push. I mean, it's like small little pushes every day that equal a couple of 100 yards or maybe about a quarter of a mile. It's not incredibly big, so I don't really think there's a chance of them doing that before the conflict ends. That either would have to be diplomatically ceded to them, or they're not going to get it back, in my assessment and my analysis at this point. So with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to FF1073, who says, if Ukraine is admitted into NATO, can the President of the United States block other members to refrain from helping Ukraine?
Not really. I mean, technically we still could, but it would be a pretty hard one to sell at that point, because they would be a part of the collective. Well, actually, no, they could. They could, actually, because we barred Turkey from getting F-35s and also barred anyone else from ever providing them with spare parts or anything like that for an F-35. So we actually can do that, even if Ukraine is in NATO. But at that point, it doesn't really matter, because they still get Article 5 protection. So if they get attacked, the whole of NATO can vote to go to war in their defense, and then we really don't have that much of a say at that point. So with that, I hope that does address that well. Also, by the way, some people are probably going to go, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make that much sense. What if the USA just denies that vote? Well, the thing is then at that point, the US Congress could just declare a war on the Russian Federation in support of NATO outside of the president, and there really is no way to reverse the declaration of war. If the Congress declares war, the president can't just go, I veto it, we're not at war. You can't really do that. You are officially in a state of war at that point if the Congress declares war. So with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to John Bernard, who says, minerals will never repay what we sent to Ukraine. And what say y'all? I would personally say that to me, it's not necessarily about the minerals. It's about the dollar amount. And what we've sent to Ukraine so far, I don't know the exact number precisely off the top of my head, but between humanitarian and military, it's somewhere around 100 billion or so, which is nowhere near 500 billion, by the way. That's obvious. I'm not good at math. Well, I know that's not close to 500 billion, but I would say that if they decide to hand over, like, for example, $100 billion worth of mineral rights, I would say then the debt's been repaid. And it's not even really a debt, because it was sent over as a grant, which is not a loan. So that's what I would say. But Enforcer, what say you?
Look, Jack, I don't even know the question anymore. You answered it and I forgot it.
He said, John said, minerals will never repay what we sent to Ukraine. And what say you?
I would largely have to agree with Matthew. It is more so about the dollar amount than anything. Because if the dollar amount of the minerals was equal to the amount of support sent, then technically we are getting repaid. But at the same time, it's not always about getting a direct return on investment. There's an indirect return on investment that we'll be getting in the long run. And that's really what we're putting the money up for, is for those reasons, not to actually get any kind of a direct return investment. Because that's how it's always worked. And you know, something that's crazy is people say we can't afford this and that, and we can't afford to support Ukraine. It's like, you know, the U.S. GDP and economy has been skyrocketing forever. And let's just go through each year of the moments in time that we were throwing money away in some kind of a war, from when this graph starts in 1960 all the way up until the present day. So let's just wander through it, and let's just take a little gander. 1960? Let's see here. Yes, the Bay of Pigs invasion. Let's see, 1961, 2, 3, and 4. Not really much was going on, but, you know, we were out there. 1965, though, is when we actually entered the Vietnam War in full. Instead of just having advisors over here, this is the Battle of Ai Dring in 1965, and this is what would lead the United States to being heavily involved in Vietnam. So from 1965 to 1973, we're heavily involved in Vietnam. By 1973, we leave. Then, let's see here, in 1970... Let's see here. I'm trying to think, because it wasn't that long until we were involved in the next deal after Vietnam. Like, they weren't large conflicts after Vietnam. They were fairly small. But we'll skip past all those because I really can't remember them, and I'm not going to pull them up. But then we also got involved in the invasion of Panama and a couple of other things. The economy was growing just fine. Then in 1991, we beat Iraq in the Gulf War handily. Loads of military expenditure to fight that 6-month-long war. Won it. Then moving on into the 90s. Then we were doing all kinds of fun stuff. We were in Somalia, you know, doing the whole Black Hawk Down deal in Mogadishu. All that kind of funness. We were also down in the Balkans trying to stop the genocide of the Kosovans by the Serbs. Yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. The economy was growing just fine. And then 2001 happens. Then we go and invade Afghanistan. Economy is growing just fine. We also go and invade Iraq in 2003. Economy is growing just fine. Those wars are going on, eating up trillions of dollars in the background of U.S. government funding, all the way up until pretty much 2021, which is right here. And the economy was growing just fine during all of that. And we spent trillions of dollars, mind you, on Afghanistan and Iraq. I believe in the end, it was like $10 trillion. So about $500 billion a year over both of those conflicts combined, the time that they lasted. And I didn't see the U.S. economy fail to afford that. And it didn't look like the economy ever collapsed during any of that either, or really any other conflict that we were involved in over the length of the entire Cold War. So it's a little bit goofy to me to make it sound like we always have to get a direct return on investment, or that we can't afford that in the long run, because it's like, well, we've afforded it in the long run for 70 years. We've afforded it in the long run for really 100 years at this point, during World War I, World War II, and every conflict since. And it's like, so why in the world, what's different about us not being able to afford it now? And it's like, oh yeah, I forgot. The the national debt. Let me go get that. The national debt. The national debt that, oddly enough, we pretty much owe to ourselves only. Because if you go down here to the actual amount of U.S. debt held by foreign countries, it's only $8.7 trillion, which is nothing. So out of the whole $36.5 trillion national debt, only $8 trillion of that's actually owed to foreign lenders. So it's not really like China's got our whole economy by the balls, because in reality, they don't. And also, if we could get an exact breakdown on the U.S. debt held by foreign countries, and it appears that we really don't. So unfortunately, we can't get that. But still, the U.S. debt held by foreign countries is insignificant compared to the total amount of the national debt. If we were to go and break this down, we would be able to, you know, get a good little idea, you know, of how much we actually owe to each governmental organization. But let me see here. Maybe we can get that from here. Let's see here. Let's see here. Let's see here. Does it break it down how much we're actually supposed to give to each government organization? Because most of this is intergovernmental loans. And, geez, folks, I can't find it. So, unfortunately, I guess we'll just have to leave that for what it is. Because this shows a lot of numbers, crazily enough, Matthew, but it really doesn't show any of the numbers about who this is actually owed to. You know, that's always the interesting thing about the debt clock to me, this website at least, is that it never actually shows you who this is owed to. But let's go look at the world debt clocks. Wow, the Chinese have a lot of national debt. That's almost equivalent to their entire GDP.
Yeah, I mean they have a lot of debt. I mean they have a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, look at Japan. They have a public debt to GDP ratio of 288%. They seem to be doing all right. We're only at 101%. And if they can succeed, why can't we? Pump the numbers up, baby. I'm just kidding, by the way. Like, it would be nice to not have the national debt skyrocket into oblivion, but at the same time, it's not like it's going to kill the country because, I mean, look at Japan. It's the fourth largest economy in the world these days and has a public debt to GDP ratio of 288%. They have they almost have a $12 trillion national debt, and their GDP is 4.1 trillion. So quite literally, nobody in their lives will ever repay the Japanese debt, and I don't really see them panicking over that, you know? Like, it doesn't ever seem like Japan's just going to cave in any day. It seems like largely they're just kind of getting by, and they're doing fine for the large part. I mean, hell, look at India. India's national debt is almost exactly the amount public debt to GDP ratio that the United States has. It's 92%. The United States is at 101%. So and if this country, by the way, is having unprecedented GDP growth, which will continue on well into the future, then why in the world is the United States always panicked about the debt? That is just an excuse to be an isolationist for no good reason.
Who's going to come collect on our debt, by the way? That's the
Nobody.
question I always ask. It's like nobody's coming to collect on that debt. You think China's going to pull up and be like, hey, we want to like turn in these banknotes, like give us some of that cash. And we're like, oh, we don't have the cash for you right now. What's China going to do? Nuke us or something? It's like, hell no, they're not.
Yeah.
It's like,
Man,
ultimately, here's the thing. Obviously it's not good to bully countries like Ukraine because they're in a desperate position. But if China wants to act stupid and be a bully, the United States is really good at doing that. So it's real easy to say, stay over there and be quiet and stop trying to like harass us about the debt because you're also in debt as well. What if the United States just said, hey, look, we want the debt back from China that we've lent to China? What are they going to do? We're not going to nuke China either.
Yeah, and also look at this. Russia, national debt, 20% compared to their GDP. That number's getting cooked hard. You know that. It's like with the amount of lending that they've tried to do off of the war, I'm sure that this number is far off if we actually got the Chinese books on the Russian debt owed to them. But there are a lot of countries here in the Western world, if you look at them, that owe more than 100% of their GDP, far more than the United States, in terms of national debt compared to their GDP. Spain, for example, is one. Portugal is another. Let's see. Let's scroll up the list and find the next one. Greece, which obviously isn't the economic success story, is one. Belgium is one. Argentina is almost right on par with the United States, just a little bit lower. Canada actually has a larger national debt than their GDP. Brazil is incredibly close. Italy, France, and the UK have national debts that are well above 100% of their GDP annually, and then the United States is at 101%. And all of these countries are getting along fine, mind you. That's what the general argument is that most of them are getting along A-okay. But for some reason, when the United States gets to this level, then we're just breaking the bank here. Like China doesn't have a national debt, or any other country doesn't either. So that's something a little bit interesting to me. And also I see some people saying the best debt's no debt. For us as people, yes, but every single country runs in the red. Like look at this chart. Which country out there is not in the red? I mean, no one is out of the red. Everyone has a pretty significant national debt. Even countries like Taiwan, Switzerland, and Turkey, although it's not even close to 100% of their GDP annually, is in a significant amount of debt. We're speaking about hundreds of billions of dollars for each of them.
I think the only countries that the national debt really matters are countries that are not militarily powerful. That's the honest truth of it. If you're a puny country that doesn't have much power, then the big ones can simply come in and basically bully them and say, hey, look, we want that money back. And then if they don't give the money back, for example, China is famous for doing that, the Belt and Road Initiative, they'll simply start taking over bits and pieces of your country and loan shark you basically. So, if you're a puny country, the debt is a big deal. But if you're like the United States, China, or Germany, or a large country, you'll be all right.
Yeah, I think that's largely the case at this point because when you look at it, like there are a lot of countries out there, GDP percentage-wise compared to their debt, that are doing far worse than the United States, and still they're doing incredibly fine. So that's an interesting one. Also, someone said only one I can think of is Norway. Norway owes 44% of its GDP in debt. It's actually on up there as well. Look at any of these countries. I mean, any of them. Poland, 55%. Portugal, 128. Saudi Arabia, 24%. Spain, 123%. Everyone owes a national debt. So to act as though, like, that's the crazy thing to me. To act as though the United States is some sort of an outlier, like we have to start repaying the debt, when literally every single one of these, look at them, the numbers aren't decreasing on any of their debts. They're increasing with every passing second. No one in this list is repaying their debts. The Russians aren't even. Like, no one is. So why in the world is it that the U.S. debt has to be shrinking while everyone else's in the world as a standard is rising right now? It's like a wild kind of an argument to make. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well. And we are on to the third to last question of the night.
Oh no! Don't let this be the third to last one. We have so many more good questions left. Like, let's take some more.
Oh, well, I mean, like, it's we're kind of starting to run overtime for a fundraiser stream. It's over 2.5 hours now.
I know. I just feel so bad because I asked for more questions, and we have I think 10 or 15 more. We obviously can't get 10 or 15 more. That would be running way too late. But we can at least get a couple extra.
All right, and we're on to the next one then.
And our next one goes to Duncan VR, who says, so how many F-16s did the Netherlands have that are now going to Ukraine and bring on the Marmot and Baba?
Hey, and I think they had about 40 or so. I think they're replacing their F-16s with the exact same amount of F-35s. But let's go and grab that Marmot. And any second now, and oh, hello there.
Oh, hello there. It's the Marmot, sir. Requested by Tom Exman and Duncan VR. Look, he's here in the fur. He's here. He's spitting facts, as you can see. They even painted it down. He's laying it down and painting it. Look, painting it red. Oh yeah, Marmot with the sharp teeth, and also he's got claws. You know, see, we never talked about that, but he's got claws on him. Look at that, Marmot.
Aw, man. Guess who's here with a desk and a chair and a trip to D.C.?
Is that hot dog bastard again? What's he doing popping up and rapping?
I'm popping up down here because I'm going to go back to the Cannon building and harass some aides to some representative and act like I'm a real big man. Aw, man.
That dirty dog.
Dirty fly, more like it. Aw, man. Part of the ship, part of the poo. I'm like, it's
No, I meant like dirty dog. Like this hot dog you give me is disgusting as hell. Take it back.
Boo-hoo.
Oh dear, he failed at the hot dog job. That's a shame.
It is the Marmot in the Fly segment. We all love the Marmot in the Fly segment, and I hope that you all enjoyed it greatly. Everyone loves Alan the Marmot, and everyone loves the Marmot and the Fly segment. But no one likes to fly. Everybody dislikes to fly with a great impetuance. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so this one is going to go to Canada is Sovereign, who says, if Putin and or Russia collapsed, would the likelihood of Ukraine getting into NATO increase?
Most likely so, especially if the Russian government changed to a more Western-leaning one. The chances of Ukraine getting into NATO would probably greatly increase because what would the argument be against it at that point? There wouldn't be any, at least from what I would tell. So with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
The next one goes to Cole Duke, who says, there are reports that the war will end within 1 year. And do you think this is actually possible anyway? And also, do you think that Ukraine would use nukes if they had them?
Ukraine would use nukes if they had them, if it got incredibly bad. But as far as the war ending within a year, I think that is possible, or within 2 years, it's very highly likely. I don't think the war can go on that much longer. Both sides have been going all out for years at this point, and so one side's going to have to break. Like, even if there wasn't a negotiated settlement, one side's probably just going to implode inwards on itself, and that's what's going to end the conflict at this point. So with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Melinda Grifford Vaughn, who says, do you think the misunderstanding by the public of what equipment was sent to Ukraine is due to the bad reports from the mass media, and it seems the public is ignorant of the real and true facts? And honestly, Melinda, like the numbers, that's too deep for the public. The public never really wants to get too deep into it like that because most people really honestly don't care. Obviously, we care on the channel because we cover it and we follow it. But most people in the general public, they just want to go about their daily lives and they don't care about foreign policy. It's not something that's on their radar per se. And I think the numbers, it probably gets mixed up in the fray and they just tune it out basically. But I do know some people that have been following the war for ages. In fact, they operate Twitter accounts. They have no damn clue what they're talking about when it comes to what equipment was sent to Ukraine or not. And they'll swear up and down they got the numbers right, and nothing will change their mind. And it's just crazy, honestly. But anyways, I digress. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to agree with that. Most people really aren't that concerned about the actual numbers, and then also some people don't even know what the hell the numbers are, and they claim to be looking at it all the time. So it would matter a bit, but the honest truth is that people are going to be misinforming the public, even if you gave them perfect information, because and I do not mean this to be insulting to the public, and of course I'm not saying this about any of y'all. Y'all are, of course, well informed and well reasoned. Y'all wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. But a lot of the public is ignorant as hell. I mean, and they choose to be ignorant on their own volition. There's nothing you can do or say for most people to remove them from their ignorance from either side of the political aisle. None. They are dead set on being ignorant, and they're proud of it, and they do not want to change that. So it's best just to kind of leave those people alone. There's no way you're going to be changing their opinions. Kind of for example, let's see here. What would be some good examples of that here inside the United States that I could give that would be far enough back in the past that we could make it work? Well, kind of like with the southern United States during the civil rights movement, I think a lot of people kind of get where I'm going there, with the state troopers and stuff in certain places, dealing with the protesters in less than peaceful means and incredibly violent means. That probably would be a good example of, you really can't change that kind of ignorance. They just kind of had to legislate it out and then ensure that it wasn't really violated by using the National Guard. Another good example would be way back in the day when the coal miners and the coal bosses were getting into battles pretty much all over the place, especially in West Virginia. You really couldn't change the ignorance on both sides there. The coal miners were adamant on wanting to kill anyone that was associated with the company bosses, and the company bosses were adamant on pretty much killing any single person that was with the labor unions or the attempted labor unions that were trying to get better conditions for the workers. I mean, it's going to be like that on every single level. Really, the best thing you can do is try and slightly steer the mob of ignorance into one direction or the other, but there's really no way to actually inform or educate people and give it an honest shot. Just really hardly any way to do it. And I know that's a lot different than what I used to say years ago, but a lot of experience on the internet has started to prove to me that the ideas that I had would be amazing if it was a realistic kind of a concept, but in an actual real world scenario, they just would never apply or work. That's why a lot of politicians simplify things down. And I'll be honest with you, that's why it seems like a lot of politicians lie, is because they know their constituents wouldn't know shit about what they were saying if they actually said it up front and just honestly. So instead, they simplify it to something like, we love Ukrainians. Ukrainians are cool. Or they turn it up to, the Ukrainians are devils and they need to give us back our money, because no one's going to get it outside of that, 90% of people wouldn't. So they just simplify it down to the most boiled down basics and then hope that people either agree or disagree with it and they get elected for those reasons. Although everything else is far more complicated and way more nuanced and in depth than either of those sides are when you put them that way. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And our next question here goes to Value Radar, who says, have you looked into AI and AGI from an existential threat to humanity lens? And it's entirely feasible. Experts in the field blaring alarms, and AI itself regards it a huge probability. Now, Value Radar, that's an interesting topic. That's generally not on the topic we cover, but I will say I actually do have quite a bit of opinions about that. And I don't think many people are going to agree with them, honestly, because most people are going to view them as conspiracy theories or some sort of alarmist talk. But from what we're hearing, just from the people that are in charge of developing artificial intelligence and also this massive $500 billion investment that they just received from the United States government, it sounds like AI is about to put a ton of Americans out of business in about 2 years. Which is going to change the entire way that our country functions. And it could have to change economic structures from what it is now to a different structure. I'm really not even sure what that would look like. I'm not really sure if the people in charge know what that would look like either. But I would say it's a threat to the way our country operates here in the United States. It's also a threat to every single country out there. And also it brings in concerns about whether or not AI is going to be able to be used by governments to monitor and surveil people on a regular routine basis that humans weren't able to do before, which could allow authoritarianism to have a breeding ground. Because, of course, whenever you have a system that's that powerful and one person can control it, that brings in the possibility of a bad actor taking charge and then putting people down and oppressing them with it. So I would say personally, it's a huge threat. I've heard what the experts have said on it, and I would generally agree with most of them. It sounds to be a huge threat, and we're racing toward it at 100 miles an hour, and we barely understand it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'll largely have to agree with all that. Matthew and me pretty much agree on that at this point, almost to the letter. So with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Eric Horner, LOC, who says, question for you both. If you could ride in any fighter jet, which would you choose? And what make that jet stand out to you? And I would personally say, I would like to ride in that Israeli F-35 that flew right over the Hezbollah's place today. And it stands out to me because it's stealth and it's nice. But Enforcer, what say you?
No offense or nothing, but have you been checked out for Tourette's? Huh? You know, you got that tick. But anyways, I would actually want to ride in the F-22. My answer changes on this from time to time. Last time I think it was the Rafale, but I would want to ride in the F-22, not the F-35, because the F-22 is a thoroughbred air superiority fighter. The F-35 is a multi-role, so technically, although I don't know the exact specs on turn rate and things like that for an F-22 and an F-35, the F-22 probably would be the most exciting ride out there. In terms of just ride experience, not talking about their combat specs or anything like that, and just the overall ride experience, the F-22 would probably be the most exciting compared to the F-35. Although the F-35 is, in every single measure, the most cutting-edge aircraft in the world out there right now, even beating out the F-22. I would say that this thing is just the bee's knees in terms of aircraft these days. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Value Radar once again, who says, how is the new Syrian government doing with stabilizing the country?
It seems to be stable from what we're seeing from the outside. Although I have heard of some things, almost like revolutionary justice being exacted in some areas, which isn't great. But it seems to be stable from the outside, but the inside situation could be different. It's just that it's not getting a lot of coverage, or even I can see it or talk about it a lot. But it does look like they are actually trying to work on stabilizing the country, bringing forward some sort of a era of peace, and then creating some form of a government. Although I really don't even know what direction that government's heading into this point. And to be entirely honest, not to be pessimistic here, but it actually looks like it might be leaning right back towards the Iranian and Russian direction because of the reception that they received at the very onset from Western line countries within the region. So with that, I hope that does address that somewhat well, at least from what I'm seeing right now. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who's lucky last person through in the lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is WNNR1957, who said, is it true that China is looking to help Russia in the rebuilding efforts of the occupied area of eastern Ukraine? And I heard that on the news today. A bit concerning.
I would most likely assume that they would be, because at that point, if the war has ended, the Chinese are just entering any kind of a financial venture that they usually would enter. So I would not doubt that at all, especially if the war had ended by that point, according to what you were hearing on the news. I personally haven't heard that, but that doesn't sound at all out of the Chinese wheelhouse, especially since they would be operating within the letter of the law. That land would be Russian at that point. It would have been ceded to them in a treaty, so there would be really no issue at all with a Chinese company or a firm going in and investing and redeveloping and rebuilding that area, because it could only make the Chinese money through the trade and economic relations that they would have with the Russian Federation. Once again, equating to trade is good. And the Chinese know that as much as any other country at this point, much to the misfortune of the United States, because it seems like the current administration may not understand that aspect, that trade is very important to national wealth building, but oh well. Anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I gotta thank you all so much once again for watching. And of course, we've been entirely honored and greatly appreciative of running this stream for each and every single one of y'all. At the end of the night, we raised $4,238 in support of Revived Soldiers of Ukraine. An amazing total. Absolutely incredible. And we will see you all on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And I just want to say thank you all once again for joining us tonight on this wonderful fundraising stream where we've raised great funds to help revive the soldiers of Ukraine. And we appreciate it very much from each and every single one of you in the LSA in the audience tonight. Once again, we'll be streaming once more on Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern. And this accent does not sound very good, so I'm going to switch back to my normal accent. But we will see you all on Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern once again. And be sure to join us then. And also, maybe one of our first short war videos will be popping up in the next couple of days. We're going to try to get back to it again. Even if the news is not massive, we're still going to try to make them again because we want to get back to it. And we honestly miss doing them. So we're trying to get back to it once more for the 10th time, actually. But anyways, thank you all for joining us tonight and the massive fundraiser. And we'll see you all then. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Heroam Slava. And with that, good night.